Well, good morning, councillors. We have a quorum. Welcome to the Monitoring Operations Committee for Tuesday, the 8th of March, 2022. Can I just read out this Chair's statement regarding this public recording? And as Chair, I welcome you to the Monitoring Ops Committee. I remind councillors that the public section of this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. The webcast will be archived and made publicly available on council websites within 2 days after each meeting for a period of 3 years. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate, decision making and encouraging openness in the transparency. However, council accepts no liability for any individual opinions or statements. This is in accordance with council's live streaming and recording of meetings protocol, which can be viewed on our website. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during this meeting and subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. So please ensure that your videos are turned on. If you wish to speak, microphone turned on, and please raise your hand electronically. Now formally open this council meeting. Good morning and tēnā koutou katoa. Call for apologies, please. I have apologies from Councillor Thompson, who's leaving early, and Councillor Rose, who's arriving late. Are there any other apologies? Looks like a full muster.
I could have to leave early, depending on how we go.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Would somebody like to move the apologies be accorded? Thanks, Lyle. Seconded by Councillor Von Daddleston. All those in favour, please say aye. Or raise your hand, actually, because that's not going to work saying aye. Thank you. That's apologies are accepted. There's no public forum. Items not on the agenda. Item 3. We're going to have a third presentation on carbon farming forestry. Would somebody like to move that third presentation be received? Thank you, Jane. Seconded by Norm. I'll put that resolution. All those raise your right hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. We'll have a third presentation this morning as well. Order of business, no change. As you see, there's 3 presentations and then we'll break for a cup of tea and then get into the balance of the meeting after that. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest?
Yes, Norm here. The Konwai Mamaku Trust presentation.
Yeah, you're chair of that trust. Yeah, thanks, Norm. I don't see it as a conflict, but for the record, we'll receive that. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. I don't think there is any, Sarah. No. Okay, moving on to the minutes. Minutes to be confirmed of the December meeting last year. Would somebody like to move they be a true and correct record? Thanks, Norm. Seconded by Doug. Thank you, Doug. I'll put that resolution. All in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you. That's a good majority. Motion is carried. Just in terms of 11.1, the publicly excluded Monitoring Operations Committee for December, I'll just read this out regarding 11.1. As the only business conducted in the publicly excluded was to confirm the minutes, and with the committee's agreement, these can be confirmed in the open. So if somebody's like to move that the publicly excluded minutes are a true and correct record from December last year, that's fine. Moved by Councillor Love, seconded by, I'll second it. Any further discussion? I'll move that the publicly excluded minutes from 7 December be received. All those raise your right hand. Thank you for that. Righto, going to
Stephen, sorry.
Yeah, Jane, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I had a matter arising from the minutes.
Oh, right. Yeah.
If that's all right.
For publicly excluded.
No, this is in the open.
Yeah, sorry, Jane, go.
Yep, in the chairperson's report, we discussed that council had approached the Ministry for the Environment regarding impact of the recent High Court decisions on mangrove management rules.
Yes.
I was just wondering, is there any update on that, please?
Sarah, would you like to comment?
Through you, Chair. We haven't had any updates yet on MFE's work that they will have to do following that High Court decision. As you know, a number of councils have written to the Minister and outlined the situation and what that will mean and the implications, not just for mangrove management, but for coastal management. We have yet to have a formal response from the Minister, but we will circulate that when we get it.
Councillor Von Danielson?
Yeah, just use the Mount Eyre as a conduit to ask whether we've had any progress on where the palm kernel that is travelling towards Tauriko is actually going to. Have we found that out yet, Sarah?
We have been working with all the industries that do move palm kernel, and they have a new factory being developed in the Mount, but not in Tauriko. So we are just following up with some of the issues around dust tracking in that area to get a handle on what those reports are.
Yes, because there certainly were massive amounts of trucks taking palm kernel towards Tauriko, and they're still going right now. So I think it definitely needs following up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Brunning, you have a question?
Yes, just in relation to that MFE letter that's going around the mangrove implications, is that a public available letter, Sarah?
We can circulate that to councillors, certainly. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any matters or other matters arising from the minutes? A lot of the matters for today's meeting have been further information you've requested from last December, so we'll just take it as it comes along, but hopefully we've answered most of your issues in this meeting. Okay, we'll move straight into our presentations, and I'd like to call on Tim Senior, and Tim is going to introduce the care groups and environmental volunteer activity for 2021. Are you there, Tim? Come in, Tim.
Yes, so I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and kia ora koutou.
Can't see you, Tim.
I'm just coming. Here we are. If it's okay, I won't go through the report in any detail. We'll just take that as read. But There are just a few comments that I'd like to make. And when I look back over the years, over the short time that I've been on the regional council staff, I've seen this care group work blossom from the tentative care group program that we put together almost 20 years ago, when we realised there was a bit of a public demand for this sort of thing. And I've watched it grow now and to the point where we support 65 care groups, which is awesome. And gives me personally a huge amount of satisfaction just seeing how far we've come. And I'd also like to think that we've refined the way we work with groups quite a bit over the years. I can remember when we first started, we put together a care group handbook, which almost required a crane to lift it. These days, we've refined that down to just a couple of pages. And when I was compiling this report, I was amazed by some of the statistics. And one of them in particular was the number of volunteer hours that go into all this work around the bay. And the very approximate figure that we came up with was 50,000 hours amongst all the people in all the groups around the region. And if you translate that into full people, it works out at 25 FTEs. And it made me think that how lucky we are that we don't have to fund 25 FTEs to do all this work. And just by way of example, the Nukaho group that you're going to hear from just shortly, we provide them with $4,000 to $5,000 worth of support each year. But in return for that, we get around about $22,000 worth of labour, and that's just working it out at the minimum wage. And one of the things that's happened over the years is that a lot of the people working in care groups have become incredible experts in their field. So again, for example, Stuart Slade with the Nukaho care group, you will hear from in a minute, probably, well, does know far more than most of us about marsh birds and monitoring them and how to protect them. And the other thing I'd just like to mention is the extra funding that we got through the LTP, which we were, of course, enormously grateful for, and has really helped us support groups to take on some projects that were hitherto far too big. It's allowed us to help out with some contractor time for those, and also to provide quite a bit of extra equipment. I guess for me and probably for some of the other staff, one of the things that we're really conscious of is that these groups deserve and a whole lot more support than we're able to give them. I just feel like a lot of the time I'm doing the bare minimum, and that of course has been exacerbated just recently in the last couple of years with all the extra funding that we've got from MPI and MFE. And just quickly, catchment groups, I think my view is that they are incredibly important in the participating in the improvement of farming practices around the region. And I'm sure you'll be well aware of the success of Project Parori in particular. But these groups really struggle to get started. You know, farmers are enormously busy people and they don't have the sorts of skills required for organising and running a group. And so I'm really looking forward to the extra funding that's coming again through the LTP that'll help support some of that work, because again, you know, as staff, we feel that we'd love to be able to do more if we had the time. And just finally, I'd just like to acknowledge something I haven't talked about in the report at all, is all the landowners and farmers that we work with in our team, doing all sorts of biodiversity protection work and riparian protection. And they too put in huge amounts of, effectively, volunteer time. And I'd just like to recognise them too. So I'd like to hand over now to Stuart Slade from the Nukaho Saltmarsh Care Group, who's just going to give you a little bit of a presentation about the work that they do. And Stuart, you want to?
Good morning, Stuart, and welcome to Bay Plenty Regional Council Monitoring and Ops. And thank you for your contribution for what you do at Nukaho, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Well, kia ora. I'd certainly like to share some of our last 19 years story from our care group with you. We got started way back in 2003, February, when a small group of locals met with representatives from BOPRC, DOC and Opotiki District Council. We were looking at what we could do to enhance and look after the saltmarsh area, which is the largest saltmarsh in the Hiwa Harbour. And as a result, by the 5th March 2003, we were a registered group with the OP Regional Council. The slide that is coming up shows Nukahau Salt Marsh. See you now, is it?
Can you just check the latency?
Are you able to see the screen on the?
Yep, good as gold. Yep, keep going.
Okay, so in the screen you can see the 20 hectare area of Salt Marsh. Right up in the very top middle, you can just pick out Wairarapa Island. The group got started with the whole aim really of looking after the salt marsh, so it enhanced it for the rare and endangered birds that live there. They are the Australian bittern, North Island fernbird, the banded rail and the spotless crake, and more recently North Island weka. The first thing we got up to the group was to actually have Tim survey the area and tell us what weed species were there that shouldn't be there, and we got working on those. And the Regional Council funded us with planting about the same time an area that the Opotiki District Council had formerly dumped all their road rubbish was cleared, and it was handed over to us with a suggestion that we might be able to include it as part of our restoration work. You can see here these blocks of rock. They were actually supplied by funding from DOC for artists and conservation, and it's become an interpretation point, as you can see below. There's never any problem having crowds along to plant, but it's not so easy with releasing.
Is that Mayor Forbes, the former mayor of Opotiki, Mayor Forbes, on a shovel?
Yes, you've got it. Then we started, we were asked to monitor what was there in the way of pests and in the way of our birds. We were given the protocols from DOC and a little bit of training and materials. You can see there that the stoats, the first year, we just had a handful of traps and we caught 40 stoats. If you go down to the bottom, last year, we were just catching just a handful, 4 in fact. So it's taken time, but with that data, we could actually see that we were being effective. And the same thing happened with our bird monitoring. We were able to see what was there and get an idea of not just presence and absence, but also number. As we worked on these sort of areas, we looked at a more encompassing approach to the whole environment, including the Nukahau stream itself. We approached other stakeholders, landowners, iwi. We had volunteers come in from a wider catchment, Whakatane and Putiki, even Kawerau. We needed to develop a bit more of a public image so that people were accepting that this was an important area to look after. Iwi came aboard, and we provided interpretive signage around the salt marsh so people knew what was going on. We also developed buffer lines, as you can see. Buffer lines here through the local dairy farm, traps and baits, and out on the end of Birk Road, another buffer line across 5 properties there, which involved negotiating with those landowners. And the dock island of Wairarapa hadn't had any controls on it. So we worked on getting controls there, and with the help of the Regional Council, we were able to get 142 bait stations over the island and 25 DOC 200s and 25 possums.
Traps.
Wow. Also, our members do volunteer here to clear the traps on that Kiwi Reserve up there, which is a 5-hour task each time we do it. We've also involved Trident High School with their environmental groups. plus the local Waitahi school. They help with planting. And we've had other groups like Lions from Taniatua helping with the boardwalk. As far as the river goes, we were able to get an EF fund to dig these inanga ponds alongside the river and plant suitable grasses. And that has provided a potential inanga spawning area with some donations and some awards that had some dollars attached to them. We were able to develop this 2 kilometres of walking track, which takes us from the lookout up here, that area, and with funding from the Whakatane District Council and the Greenwood Trust, we got materials to build a 50-metre boardwalk out onto the very edge of the Marsh area. Of course, all of this happens because of all the volunteer hours that go in. Typically, as Tim said, over 1,000 hours a year. And you can see from the graph that's typically half or just over goes on predator control. Now, in the case of bird monitoring, we found that we used fernbirds in the finish as indicative species because they are very weak flyers, they're territorial, they nest very close to the ground, and these are easily predated. So by keeping a tab on them, we were able to see that our control of rats and mustelids was being successful. After our first few years of trapping, you can see the trend line there tells the story. We also, particularly on the island, have photo plots to show what happens when you can reduce the rat numbers, and the vegetation there is off to a really good start, and it gives us an idea over the years of what effect low rat numbers are having. At times, we've got the island down to probably almost 0 rat population, but it varies. Rats can swim and it repopulates fairly quickly, so it's an ongoing thing. We have an annual plan with Regional Council, as Tim said, with a budget of around about $4,000 or $5,000 a year. Which helps cover herbicides and plants and baits and traps and other incidentals. We're registered as a charitable organisation, but otherwise we're just an informal group. Our members like to get out there and make a difference, not sit around in meetings. It's just amazing what a small number of people, what a huge difference they can make in a fairly short time. Couple of other points. DOC is also, not DOC, but Regional Councils provided us with some training for spray use and other things. And we find that it's fantastic working with Tim and Regional Council. They're responsive to our needs. They keep paperwork to a minimum. And unlike some of DOC's requirements, we really appreciate having this, I suppose, necessary task simplified for us. And the other thing is they really share our successes with us and our enthusiasm when things go right and we get good results. So I think probably leave the roundup there. Thank you very much for inviting me along to share our story.
Oh, thank you very much, Stuart. That's brilliant. That's a feather in your cap, and it makes us feel good too for funding you. So thank you very much for your work. And I think it was Councillor Thompson who was bold last year and put the extra money up front. I think we put $500,000 into volunteer support groups, and certainly we're getting good value for money when we see progress like that. And people doing the work on the ground. And so congratulations to you and your group. It's a pleasure to be able to walk beside you and doing these jobs. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Stuart. Any final comments, Tim, before I hand over to Anna to introduce our other guests?
No, I don't think so. I think Stuart's kind of said it all, really.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Stuart. Now I'd like to introduce Anna, who's going to introduce Andrew and Pamthorpe from the Johnson Reserve and Brian Breen from the Wairarapa Care Group. Anna, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, councillors. For those of you who don't know me, I am Anna, and I'm the Land Management Officer that gets the privilege to work with over 30 groups here in the Western Bay. I just wanted to thank Tim for preparing and speaking to the Care Group report. It's a real pleasure for us to be able to celebrate and acknowledge all their efforts and the mahi that they undertake. So thank you for that. Today we do have a joint presentation, and it's between one of our longest standing groups and our newly formed groups here in Tauranga. So it's a pretty special story, and I would just like to introduce Andrew and Pam from the Johnson Reserve Care Group and Brian Breen from the Wairarapa Care Group. So hopefully they're online. There they are. Over to you guys.
Kia ora, I'm Pamthorpe from Johnson's Reserve Care Group.
For some reason I can't see Pam. Oh, there you are. Good. Hi, morning. How are you? Yeah, good.
Hi.
Oh, welcome aboard.
Kia ora, my name is Brian Breen from the Wairarapa Care Group in Welcome Bay.
Okay, thank you. Please tell us of your good work at both of those reserves.
Just about there. I
Kia ora.
think everyone can see.
Oh, can everyone see that?
Yep, good as gold. Fire away.
Nā mai haere mai ki Johnson's Reserve a Tāhua, ko Pamela Thorpe taku ingoa. Good morning. I'd like to introduce you to the beautiful Johnson's Reserve in Welcome Bay. My name's Pam Thorpe, and I'm a member of the care group that works in this lovely reserve. The area is in the boundary of Ngāti Hei iwi, and it's of cultural significance to the area. It's also a significant wildlife corridor, and TCC mentioned that in their long-term plan. Now, the care group is made up of 3 parts. At the very top end is the Johnson's Reserve Salt Marsh. The area bounded in orange is Johnson's Reserve, and the area bounded in black is part of Waipuna Park.
All right.
So our vegetation varies from the salt marsh at the north, wetlands in the middle, and then at the southern end, we go up to the rocky stream area that's affectionately called the Waterfall. There are several stands of exotic trees throughout the reserve, which blend in beautifully with the extensive native planting that we've got. So the care group here began some 20 years ago. TCC started an initiative where they invited locals in to do some weeding and a little bit of replanting. And very quickly, a group of locals took up the offer of starting a care group. One of the early members was Merrick Bellaby. Here he is in the front of the photo. And then he was joined quickly by Pete Cooper, a long-time resident of Welcome Bay. Merrick and Pete are still very active members. They work twice a week in the reserve. They're down there rain, hail and shine. Merrick likes nothing more than being down in the rain and clearing the drains. They've been joined now by a small group of other volunteers. It's about 5 to 8 of us will turn up every week for a couple of hours on a Thursday morning. It works out approximately 20 hours a week, volunteer hours, around about 800 to 900 hours a year. So we focus mainly on weeding and replanting. So we remove weeds like this to the lovely flax planting you can see. And this convolvulus bank,
Oh, yeah.
which, yeah, unfortunately, we have still quite a lot of in the reserve, even though we're working hard to get rid of it, to this lovely grasses and flax area. So we have a community planting day, or planting period, actually, it goes over several days. Our plants and equipment are provided by Regional Council, and we are extremely grateful for all the assistance that we get, the money we get to buy the plants and the equipment that we use within the reserve. So we invite local community members and school children, some of them a little bit hesitant to get mucky, but never mind, they come along, have good fun. The reserve's got really well-marked tracks, really good walking areas. To walk right around, it takes a leisurely walk, will take about 2 hours to get right around the reserve. And it's made use of really thoroughly by locals in the reserve. There's always people there, dog walkers, bikers, walkers, kids, pushchairs, everything, runners. And the latest addition we've had to Waipuna Park is a container cafe. So now people can come and grab their cup of coffee, walk through the reserve, and it's really contributing to a beautiful community feel in the reserve. Lots of people come, sit around, chat, and then go for their wander. And finally, we'd like to say a big thank you to Anna for her care, overseeing us, advising us, encouraging us, and lovely get-together that we have with Anna once a year. And so it's a huge big thank you to the Regional Council for their funding. And also we'd like to thank Diane Payton from Tauranga City Council, who has an input into our reserve as well. And so now I'd like to hand over to Brian Breen, who is not only a really staunch member of the Johnson's Reserve Care Group, but he started what I believe is the newest care group in our area, the Wairarapa Care Group.
Good morning, Brian, and welcome to Operations and Monitoring Committee. Floor's yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kia ora, and thank you, Pam, for that lovely introduction. Yes, we're brand new. So the Wairarapa Care Group is in Welcome Bay. And this is a picture of the little stream bridge which goes over the stream, which goes from Riverstone all the way down to Welcome Bay School and Welcome Bay Road. So as I mentioned, we started in July of last year. Why did we start? Well, my wife and I had been volunteering with the Johnson Reserve Care Group for about 3 years, and we really enjoyed the experience. Great people and rewarding volunteer outdoors work. I then attended an EnviroHub Hui with Pam last year, and part of the material was a brochure on starting a care group, which you can see here. And coincidentally, that good-looking gentleman on the front of the care group brochure is Merrick, who founded the Johnson Reserve Care Group. So a bit of 2 degrees there. So I had this light bulb moment and decided, right, I've been thinking of creating a care group in our local neighbourhood, and let's do it. So my wife and I had been clearing pest plants in the Wairarapa Reserve area, and we met a few locals who used the reserves with their families. And this was typically over lockdown when people were out and about. And I sort of floated the idea that I was interested in creating a care group, and they seemed very positive. So I called Anna at Bay of Plenty Regional Council, who I knew from Johnson Reserve. And I said to Anna that I was interested in starting a care group, but there was one condition. I would only start it if she was our land management officer. And Anna said, well, funnily enough, one of my goals is to increase the number of care groups in the Bay of Plenty region. So I thought, right, we have a deal. So we met up with Diane Payton at TCC and created the Wairarapa Care Group. And on the right, there's a diagram of the scope of the care group. So at the top is Welcome Bay Road, and just opposite is the Welcome Bay School. And at the bottom is Riverstone. You might be familiar with the Riverstone Drive area. There's some lovely lifestyle blocks up there. So the Wairarapa Reserve is the largest parcel of land. That includes the stream. And there's also the Grand View Reserve, which is number 1 on the right-hand side. So those are both designated TCC ecological reserves. The other 2 parcels of land, Eclipse Terrace and Otiki Park Drive, are stormwater reserves. So they're pretty messy and gnarly. And we tend to focus on the Wairarapa Reserve at the moment. That's where most of the public spend their time. And that's got a beautiful trail which was upgraded a couple of years ago. Lots of the children that go to school come down from all those surrounding roads and they go down through the reserve on their way to school. Key activities of the group year round. Our main focus is manually controlling pest plants, particularly woolly nightshade, pampas, Chinese privet and wild ginger. We have regular weekend working bees. Because at least half of the group is still working, we find that a Saturday morning or Sunday morning is the best time for us to get together. 2 areas we're focusing on this year are Big Bend and Stream Bridge. So these areas have been sprayed by TCC and our care group will be planting June of July this year in conjunction with public events. So we've got at least 2,200 plants from TCC to put in this year. And again, I mentioned getting the public involved. I've approached Welcome Bay School and one of our members will be talking to the Waldorf School in Welcome Bay to see if they would like to do a planting morning during the week. This is a picture of Big Bend. We love giving nicknames to our particular areas within the reserve. So this is how it looked last year with masses of Tradescantia, and to the left there's a ton of privet. And on the right-hand side is a slightly different view. This was after the full circle contractors who were deployed by Diane at TCC to go in, chop down all the trivets and mulch them all up and prepare for planting this year. And this is an area just down from our house in Otiki Park Drive, the Grand View Reserve. The stormwater ponds is an upper pond and a lower pond, very messy, lots of weeds. So we had a working bee there last October, and on the right you can see the difference in the clearing of the weeds. And this was after a rain event when the ponds were nice and full. And here's a picture of the Grand View Reserve working bee last October. That's Pam in the front. And some of you might know or recognise Ruth Birk. Ruth is just by the right-hand pipe there. And her husband is with her, their little their little daughter in the wheelbarrow. So she was having a great time being carted around the reserve.
Of course, of course.
Regarding relationships, Bay of Plenty Regional, we have Anna as our land management officer. So we work together on our annual plan for this year. We have funding of about $1,000 for tools and gloves and cut and paste. We don't do any mass spraying within our group, and I record the hours. We're currently up to 62 hours since we started last year. Anna is really supportive and responsive, and she's fantastic to work with. So we're very pleased to have her on board. With TCC, we have Diane Payton with Parks and Reserves, and Diane supplies contractors to do tree felling and spraying, and she is funding and supplying the new plants for this year. Again, Diane is very supportive and great to work with. We met 2 weeks ago on site to start planning the planting program for this year. Who's going to do what, which days are we going to work, et cetera, delivery of the plants, just going through some of those logistics. And finally, we have a Facebook site, Wairarapa Care Group, and we post working bees and events. And we have 3 followers at the moment, which is really exciting. So we're hoping to build on that as we go forward. So thank you. That's it from one of the newest care groups in the region.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Pam. Councillors, are there any questions you'd like to put to any of those care groups? Congratulations, you two. Those are stunning projects in our back door garden. And I think that first one of yours, Pam, I've ridden around there on my electric bike, and so I'm pretty familiar with that. Even though I'm from Rotorua, I've been into that place. So congratulations. Any questions from councillors? I've got a question from Councillor Nees.
Well, firstly, a great big thank you. Getting presentations like that are why I love my job. It's just so wonderful to see the community out there giving back to their place and building something wonderful for the community and looking after our environment. It's really amazing. So thank you all so much for coming and making our day. The question that I have is that we have been concerned in the past that our volunteer workforce was ageing and that we needed to somehow be helping you grow and perhaps reach out to other people that may have an unbounded supply of energy, young people, etc. So have you any, other than your inviting the community in and doing work with schools, have you got a situation where you feel that you're self-replicating as a care group?
I'll speak to that a little bit first. So Pam here from Johnson's Reserve. No, we're definitely ageing. I guess our average age would be mid-70s probably when we take American Pete into it. We are lucky we have got 2 younger women have started. They have come from a horticulture course that's being run in town. They contacted me and asked if they could have a walk through the reserve and look at some of the work we did. And after that little walkthrough, a couple of them have said that they would like to volunteer with us. So that's fantastic. But no, we're definitely on the ageing side. The only other thought I have had is trying to contact people who back onto the reserve and ask if they would like to look after just their little patch that backs onto their fence, really, and involve the landowner and the children and whatever in the family. But so far, I haven't done that, but I'm thinking about it.
I think that's a really good strategy, Pam, because it's those local people caring about their own backyard that's where you get your best buy-in is, it's in my backyard. So keep going. Any other questions to, I don't know, having a baby in a wheelbarrow is a pretty good demographic. I don't know.
Yeah, Brian here. But yeah, we're a little bit lucky in that I think because my wife and I just bumped into people over lockdown, and I guess our neighbourhood is a little bit younger, where we are around Otiki Park Drive in the school. So our group are all middle-aged. I'm the oldest in our group. We've got an airline pilot with 3 young kids under 6. Ruth has just had a new baby. There's 2 children there. So, we're hoping to build on that younger group. And one of our other guys has got 3 kids. So we're a little bit of a different demographic.
Yeah. And Anna supplying morning tea. I mean, that is a far better morning tea than we get as councillors now that we're in live streaming and working from home. So put food on the table. That's always good to get people that way. Councillor I'll come back to you, Stuart. Councillor Eaty first.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Councillor Nees. Before I came onto the regional council, I had no idea that care groups were a thing. So it's amazing to see the work that the care groups have been doing for a long time, and especially in my area in the Eastern Bay, and the work that Stuart and his team are doing out on the Nukuho salt marsh, because I've driven past there many times, and over the years just watched the beautification of that drive through Cheddar Valley. So I just wanted to say thank you, Stuart, and to you and your care group for the work you've done over decades. It's amazing. My question was the same question, I guess, putting to Stuart with regards to the demographic and the succession planning for your group, Stuart?
Well, it's interesting. Most of our group are probably white hair, but over the years, as one or two drop off, excuse this pun, we have newer blood coming in. On Sunday, we have our regular Sunday meetings on the first Sunday of every month, and this particular Sunday we had 16 people turn up, and in that group there were 3 new people. I think one of the things is when new people move into the district, we have a district Facebook and we keep in contact, and that seems to encourage people. The running track or the walking track that we have for 2 kilometres, a lot of people use that, and that introduces them to what's going on along the edge of the track with baiting and the trapping, and they become interested and join us. And I think the social event, after every event, we have morning tea and so forth, and people often stay for 3/4 of an hour afterwards, talking, carrying on. So it develops a little social group. One stage we were talking about just having rosters and not having a care group get together, and oh no, don't do that. We enjoy the social part of it too. And our annual AGM, supported by the Regional Council, is another social event.
So thank you, Stuart. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Anna, for your presentation from Pam and Brian, and thank you, Tim, for your presentation from Stuart. That's superb. I just, we created it's obviously we had to be bold as councillors to create this fund, councillors, and it's all allocated this year in 12 months. So and this is what we're seeing as the results. People are playing in their own backyard, working in their own backyard, and protecting their own backyard. Councillor Paula Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly want to echo the other comments that have been made. It's absolutely fantastic to see this work. Mr. Chairman, would you entertain a motion that we add to our annual plan workshop discussion tomorrow a discussion on further support for volunteer organisations in the forthcoming annual plan? And if you're prepared to entertain that motion, I'd be prepared to move.
Well, it's on the agenda on page 17 that we receive the summary of the care group and volunteer environmental activity for 2021. If you'd like a bullet point 2, Councillor Thompson, that we, what would be the wording, Sarah, that we tomorrow at our long-term plan workshop, we further discuss funding for more funding for volunteer and environmental groups. If that suits you, Councillor Thompson, something like wording to that effect.
Perhaps not the support, because I think it's wider than funding. So funding certainly would be in the mix, but I'd certainly like to see a discussion on this particular matter tomorrow at the annual plan workshop. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Have you got that, Shari?
Happy to second that, Chairman, to get it on the table.
Yes. Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Thurston. So this is on page 17, councillors, of the agenda. There's bullet point 1, bullet point 2. I'll put that, is there any further discussion? No, I'll put that resolution on page 17. All those in favour, raise your right hand, please. Thank you. That motion is carried. Right, now we are moving on to our second presentation, another good news story, and I'd like to call upon Pam to introduce Louise Saunders, who's CEO of the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust. Over to you, Pam.
Thank you, Chairman Winters, and tēnā koutou councillors, and to our fantastic care group representatives. Thank you so much, Pam, Merrick, Brian, Stuart, and all the volunteers for the mahi that you do. My children have been through Welcome Bay School, so the reserve that you're working on is very familiar to me as well. Right, so moving slightly inland to the Kaimai Mamaku, many councillors will recall the ongoing support for the Kaimai Forum since it was formed in 2009, firstly through the New Zealand Landcare Trust, and latterly thanks to a move by Councillor Brunning with the $1.5 million to increase agency funded pest control where social license to exist, and also to promote and enable hapu and community action to be extended. I'm really pleased with the progress that we've been able to make there and that we've been able to contribute to. But now we're the small party in town because the Minister of Conservation announced the Jobs for Nature funding of $19 million for work in the Kaimai Mamaku a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago. And I'm really excited with the progress that the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust has made over that time as well. Chaired by Councillor Brunning, I'm really pleased to introduce to you the Trust's new Chief Executive, Louise Saunders, who I've known for a number of years. She's an exceptionally talented ecologist and leader, formerly with Boffa Miskell, and she's going to tell you all about the history and the future of the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust. Over to you, Louise.
Good morning, Louise, and welcome to Monitoring Ops Committee. Pleasure having you aboard and look forward to your presentation.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for that introduction, Pam. I feel a little embarrassed actually there, but thank you. That's very much appreciated. I will share my screen.
Yep, good as gold.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, thank you everybody for allowing me the opportunity to present today. I'm going to go backwards a little bit in order to go forwards because I think it's really timely to reflect on the whakapapa of the Trust, where it's come from, and the contribution that so many people have made, including the Regional Council and councillors, to the position we find ourselves in now. So as Pam said, the Manaaki Kaimai Mamaku Forum, or the Kaimai Catchments Forum as it was first known, met in 2009 to discuss the concerns. There was a wide range of stakeholders who were concerned about the health of the Kaimai Mamaku forests. And that was based on a really common understanding from years of New Zealand Forest Service and Wildlife Service surveys that the Kaimai Mamaku is a really unique ecosystem. It's highly diverse. It has combinations of plants and animals that aren't found anywhere else in New Zealand, 500 to 600 species of plants, some pretty significant animal species up there, kiwi kaka, falcon, kokako, untold native invertebrates. But in 2009, when the forum first met, a lot of those species were already experiencing significant decline. And there had already been local extinctions of birds such as whio, hihi, titi, tieki, and others, some that we'll never know about potentially. So there was this understanding that the forest health and condition, and particularly of the bird species up there, was in decline. And even though Te Papa Arewhai knew about this, had this information, they were never adequately resourced to provide the kind of pest control that would have been needed to prevent that decline from occurring, besides the specific pest control that they were undertaking in some of the better quality areas. So the forum's discussions continued over quite a few years, and in due course they commissioned a pest control management plan to develop an effective approach to eat the elephant. This is obviously a very large area of land, so there needed to be a stepwise approach to that. One of the most important things that the forum agreed on was that this wasn't just public conservation land and native forest that we're talking about here. They wanted a landscape scale approach. So the forum's project area agreed on extends from Karangahaki Gorge in the north, all the way down to Mokaihaha, south of Rotorua, and from Tauranga Harbour and the Papamoa Hills in the east, across to the Waiho River in the west. So that's approximately 240,000 hectares. The forum developed a mission and vision statements, the mission statement being restoration of the Māori of the Kaimai Mamaku, and the vision statement being the Kaimai Mamaku thrive, hence we thrive, and then developed some working groups that produced a strategic plan and operational plans to look at how this restoration process could be enacted. There were some pretty key results that came out of those discussions. One of them was the formation of the Joint Agency Committee, of Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Waikato Regional Council and Te Papa Arawhai, which was latterly joined by Manaaki Kaimamamaku Trust trustees when the trust was duly formed. And the idea of that joint agency committee was to better integrate and coordinate their pest control operations throughout the Kaimamamaku. And that resulted in this regional council, this committee, committing what I understand was a significant uplift in spending, and that was matched by the partner agency. So that effectively doubles the pest control spending in the forests from 2020 to 2025. And that was a significant decision, and it was a key influencer for later jobs for nature decisions. The other key outcome was the formation of the Māori caucus of the forum, which is now named Ngā Iwi Tōpū. And that was an iwi and hapu decision-making group that represents Te Ao Māori values and has come to be a significant influence with the trust as well. So the forum recognised that a formal entity was needed if the project was ever to be provided with funding. And so the Manaaki Kaimamamaku Trust was formed in 2019, initially with 5 trustees, but it was really quickly recognised that better representation was needed and a co-governance structure. And that restructure was undertaken in 2020. Ngā Iwi Tōpū nominated 6 Māori trustees, and community nominations were sought for 5 community trustees. So we now have a trust with trustees, with a governance group that represents the diverse makeup of communities of 2 regions, but also the trustees in aggregate have an extensive breadth and depth of skills, which is absolutely necessary as we embark on delivering what's going to be a pretty immense project. So of course in 2020, the dreaded COVID arrived. The government put together the COVID recovery package, and Jobs for Nature arrived on the scene. And Te Papa Arawhai and Iwi Hapu put together a proposal for the Kaimamamaku restoration project, and that was based on that groundwork of the forum, identifying the issues and the solutions, with the trust identified as the entity that would administer that funding and deliver the project outcome. So it was in part due to the commitment made by this regional council through the joint agency committee and its funding, which led to the government support for the project. So since July 2021, a transitional governance group has been responsible for governing the project, and the transitional project team of Te Papa Arawhai staff have supported iwi and hapu projects to submit proposals to the government's group, and I'll talk a bit more about some of those projects a little further on. But first, I'd like to focus on the groundwork that the trust has completed in the last 9 months or so. One of the things that our trust recognises is the hard work of the Kaimamamaku Forum journey over more than a decade. We've chosen not to set aside any of that work. The mission and the vision are unchanged. The forum identified in its operational plan 10 objectives, and of those the trust has chosen 3 for action for the period 2022 to 2024. And that set the foundation for the trust, for the establishment of the trust and its direction. And the forum and its involvement with Ngā Iwi Tōpū, or the formation of Ngā Iwi Tōpū, has also assisted with our co-governance structure. So we have 2 chairs, Norm Brunning and Mokoro Gillette, who ably co-chair the trust. The vision of iwi and hapu and Te Papa Arawhai for the Kaimamamaku restoration project gives us a platform now for meaningful landscape scale, excuse me, action, restoration action. And then Jobs for Nature, of course, has given us the kickstart for that restoration mahi. So our strategy recognises that and builds on that, builds on the whakapapa, builds on the kaupapa, and we have a 5-part approach. The first is already underway, multiple long-term projects, and that focuses on long-term implementation. Now these are iwi and hapu-led projects, paid FTEs that get stood up around an entity. They have all of the appropriate processes, health and safety. They get technical support from a range of people, including Te Papa Arawhai staff and Bay of Plenty Regional Council and Waikato Regional Council staff as needed. And they are expected to collaborate with groups alongside them, and that's something that we're working on actively at the moment. We all know that positive outcomes of pest control stop the minute that you stop control. So all of these groups are aware that we want to be in this for the long haul, accepting that Jobs for Nature is not in it for the long haul. So that's one of the challenges that the Trust and all of their projects individually faces, and one that's part of our strategy to work on. We also know that the small patches of intensive pest control suffer terribly from pest reinvasion at the edges, so we need our projects to collaborate and be integrated across the entire project, and obviously that's a model that the Joint Agency Committee's been working on as well. With everybody singing from the same song sheet, I think we've got a far better chance of success with some great role models. And we know that that's how we'll deliver the most effective reversal of biodiversity decline and really effective restoration. And we need the project to encompass all aspects of restoration, both animal pest and plant pest control. We need to address kauri dieback, look at myrtle rust protections where we can, focus on restoration and connectivity planting, species translocation, management of gene pools. Eventually, we need to make sure that we've got place appropriate restoration mahi right across that landscape. So that means that we can't focus on just a single tool. We need to utilise every tool and method that data shows us is effective at every particular place. And we can only do that with a comprehensive data management system so everyone can see patterns and trends, and that becomes a transparent process. I'll talk a little bit about a GIS database in a minute, which Anna and Tim and the team will be hopefully contributing to as well with their teams. So obviously, if we've got long-term projects, we're going to need long-term funding that extends beyond Jobs for Nature's support and technical support of every project across the board. One of the things that I find quite interesting about the GIS database is that if you look at the locations and the activities of all the projects and the community groups and the landowners and all of the people doing this amazing work out there in the landscape, it looks like somebody threw a box of jigsaw puzzle pieces across the floor. And at its heart, the Trust's job is to show everyone the full picture represented by the vision, and that let every jigsaw puzzle piece know that the others exist and what their part in that overall vision is going to look like. So that's something that I keep in mind, that analogy of the jigsaw puzzle pieces and helping everybody to fit together and find their place in the overall picture. So I had the honour of being appointed the Trust CEO in late September last year. It's been something of a roller coaster ride. Since then, I don't really think my feet have touched the ground. We have been very, very busy. I'm sure Councillor Browning will attest, setting up organisational infrastructure to deliver on that mission and vision, developing strategies, policy, processes. We've recruited a team. I'm pleased to announce we've got 2 new people starting. We've launched communications channels, re-engaged with forum members and stakeholders, continue to contribute to the Joint Agency Committee and the Transitional Governance Group, reviewing the project proposals as they come forward. But the Transitional Governance Group is now dissolved, and next month the Trust will take over flying solo the administration of the Jobs for Nature Kaimamamuku Restoration Project, and that's a significant milestone. We'll take on the contracts for the specialist advisors that are supporting the projects, health and safety, GIS, pest control, bird monitoring, all sorts of specialist people, and they stand alongside the Te Papa Atawhai and regional council staff that are also providing technical support to the projects. As of today, we have 3 projects that are fully operational across around about 9,000 hectares. There's another 2 projects just about to commence, 3 more projects that were approved last week, and a further 2 that are in preparation, and we have early indications of interest from a further 2 groups. At the end of February, another key milestone was the relaunch of the forum with an online event, well attended. We had a range of speakers across a whole range of different topics, and that was a really fantastic way to re-engage people again with the kaupapa, and to give the forum the sense of the immense power that they have to leverage their network and push forward the objectives of the project. Communication and engagement is a key contributor to success, so we know that getting our communication channels focused on facilitating collaboration between projects and community and care groups like the ones we've heard from today, iwi and hapu and landowners is a key task for the Trust. It is all about people at the end of the day. These photos illustrate in part what we'll need to achieve and to continue to support going forward. We're focusing on ensuring that every project, landowner, care group, community conservation group and agency knows what everyone else is doing, and coordinating that and providing the support where it's needed. Joining the dots, joined up thinking is absolutely essential. Building community activity. There are some communities that have really limited engagement or no engagement at all with this project. So we need to make sure that we're raising community awareness and drawing those connections, making those connections between people working in the same places, but not necessarily aware of what each other are doing. So alongside the Trust's team, the Forum, Stakeholder Group and Ngāiwi Tōku will have a crucial role to play in making that happen, and adding new layers of restoration action and data as we go forward. But even before the Forum relaunch, we've had some really early success just getting the newsletter relaunched and social media channels out there. Some examples include a Trust newsletter article that profiled the last remaining swamp Maori Tawaki in Te Araha, and that prompted an inquiry from Project Porori and also from the Waitau Stream Care Group, and we managed to connect the two of them. Project Porori has a nursery that has swamp Maori in it. Waitau Stream Care Group has some swamp Maori and they wanted to plant more, so we put the two together, and Project Porori is gifting them some seedlings to plant in the area, so that's fantastic. We had a hapu restoration group at Nongataha who's working down alongside Mokaihaha, and they've extended their the use of their FTEs into Mokaihaha's area to help them to extend new trap lines and to service those traps, and that's helping to protect their growing kokako population. And just last week we had a project team presenting a proposal for weed control around the base of Mount Te Araha, aware of their neighbouring hapu doing animal pest control and looking to be connected to share knowledge about animal pest control so that they can add that layer to their project proposal. So that was really fantastic, and looking to the Trust to help them with that. We're really looking for our team to work alongside Regional Council and Te Papa Ranger teams, land management officers and ranger teams to facilitate much more of this collaboration. And I really think that that might speak to some of Councillor Nee's concerns, understandable concerns about the ageing volunteer population, something that we're all working really hard to make sure that we have that renewal of those groups going forward. And this might be, this community awareness raising and the joining of dots between projects might be a really great way to address that. So our forward work program, which is I'm sure something that you're all interested to hear about, because we have a significant amount of mahi to execute in the next 12 to 18 months. So we have 6 main elements that we'll be working on. There's obviously a lot that sits in behind these, but yeah, these are the main 6. I've obviously talked about the importance of collaboration and connecting people and places. We've got a number of strategies for achieving that. So I've talked about the GIS database. This has a public-facing dashboard, and that will be a key tool in making data on restoration activity and outcomes visible to more people, making the jigsaw puzzle pieces visible. That's using the expertise of somebody, of a company, Ethos Environmental, who is already working with care group data. They're already working with community conservation group data. So we're really pulling all of those layers of existing data together. We're not reinventing any wheels here, using exactly the same systems that are already in place. Within the Joint Agency Committee, a team of us is also forming a monitoring working group to pull together all of the existing data sources that exist, making that data visible, identifying data gaps, considering the best methods of analysis, and then that will help us to help all of those project teams, all of the care groups, to refine their activity and make sure that they're using the most effective, most efficient means possible. And we could see from that previous presentation about how long it takes to achieve the kind of control that's necessary to get bird numbers to increase again. So we need to make sure that every volunteer hour is absolute gold. It's doing the most effective job that it can in that hour, and that data is absolutely necessary. So we're going to be working hard on that. And we will be looking to increase capacity. The goal of the project funded by Jobs for Nature is to achieve 60 FTEs across the board, and we're hoping to increase beyond that. So as the project teams become, the paid project teams become bedded in, we're expecting to see more people added to those teams and more people doing more. We want to build both capacity and capability in that space. And the expectation is that as we add new layers of restoration activity to each project, then that's absolutely achievable. That'll be aided by both the Trust and the agencies facilitating more knowledge sharing. We already have a number of wānanga and resources planned. A few of the topics are shown there. These are ones that have come to light as we've worked through that process of re-engagement and looked at what the projects, each of the project's knowledge needs are. Department of Conservation, Te Papa Arawhai, has already run a very successful wānanga on myrtle rust and kauri dieback, and we're looking to extend that out to community groups and potentially to some of the stream care groups as well. There is a real thirst for knowledge out there at the moment, and as Tim pointed out when he was speaking to his report, there really has been quite a change in the community attitude to getting involved in these things and getting out and getting their hands dirty and contributing something back. So that thirst for knowledge is something that we can see that we can fill a need for. Moving on, this is my last slide. We're also taking a leaf out of the Regional Council's book. You have a very effective stakeholder engagement platform online. We want to develop something very, very similar, which will provide a knowledge base for all things kaimai-mamaku, and build that sense of whānau around everybody who is involved in that restoration effort. It'll contain information on each of the projects. It'll link to existing websites and Facebook pages and things of community groups and stream care and land care groups and so on. It'll provide a spotlight to the GIS dashboard and raise awareness about ways to get involved in restoration activity, but also citizen science. We're really keen to engage with the community by having them engage with things like the upcoming Kiwi survey that don't involve a massive amount of time or technical expertise to get involved, but they do engage people with the mahi, so that's really good. I think, though, that the Trust's biggest challenge, and possibly a challenge that all of us face, is achieving that long-term funding to support the strategy. Jobs for Nature ends in 2024. And so our team has a clear focus on securing that long-term funding through a portfolio of sources. A number of examples include long-term, larger scale impact funds like Next Foundation. There are a plethora of government funds like Te Mana Otawai, Billion Trees, a number of Te Puni Kokiri funds as well. We can tap into some of those. There are local charitable funders, Bay Trust, Trust Waikato, TECT, Acorn and so on. But perhaps the biggest unknown and the avenue with possibly the biggest financial potential are commercial funders and carbon biodiversity offset funding. There are some really incredible examples of industry supporting conservation through staff volunteerism, financial support and ongoing proportion of sale type funding. So those are all avenues that once my team is on board and firing on all cylinders, I'll be turning my attention squarely to. So in summing up, the Trust has a significant workload ahead of us, and we're immensely, immensely grateful for the support and collaboration of Bay Auckland Regional Council in working towards achieving the vision, both in the past and today. Because of this Council's participation in the Kaimai-Mamaku Forum and the Joint Agency Committee, we're now in a position to make the restoration of this landscape a reality. So to all of you, thank you very much. Ngā mihi.
Oh, Louise, that's superb. That's just superb. Congratulations. And Norm, congratulations to you too, mate. Any questions to Louise, and then final wrap up by Norm? Te taru.
Ngā mihi ki a koe te kaiwhakahaere matua mo te Manaki Kaimai Mamaku Trust Moto Whakāturanga Tino Pai. Congratulations, Louise. What a great presentation. Apologies for my lateness, Mr. Chair, but I caught these magnificent presentations on the previous one and this one, which basically, as Councillor Neese says, is why we come to work, really. I mean, we have challenging decisions to make, but boy, is this very gratifying. And I can feel Councillor Brunning's face beaming with delight, watching this baby grow and now start to run. And what I'm really pleased about is the relationship that you've built with the iwi. And I get some really good feedback on the southern end of the Mamakus coming down into the Rotorua area. And I get some really good feedback of how well that is working and how delighted they are to be participating. And this is a real role model for how we can operate. And I have to say, for the regional council and, you know, my own view, again, this is an exemplar of how partnerships should be working and how engagement should be working by the community for the community. And I'm really supportive of Councillor Thompson's view of how we really can up the ante in many ways around supporting these types of initiatives and the ones before, because that's why we're here, not to dominate and direct, but hopefully the communities can direct us in the best way to do things on the ground. So Louise, to yourself, to Councillor Brunnings and all the team, you know, congratulations. This is a real wow factor. Kia ora. Oh, and by the way, you need not be embarrassed by the introduction that Pam gave to you. I mean, we have a saying in Māori, kaore te kumara he kōrero ake reka, meaning that the kumara never says how sweet it is, but in your presentation and the depth of your analysis, it shows you are the right person for the job. So no embarrassment required. It's well-founded, Pam. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Yeah, concur with Te Taru. Yeah. Any other questions, councillors? If not, Pam, did you want to have any final comments? And then I'll hand over to Norm for a final comment. Pam?
Thank you, Chairman Winters. It's been fantastic to have this opportunity to speak with councillors on these projects.
Okay. Norm, final words?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder, Louise, can you put your face up on the screen? Because
I've got it.
You, and you need to be recognised if at all possible. But apart from that, Mr. Chair, yeah, always, as I've said many times, grateful for the $1.5 million over 5 years that gave the boost that the forum and the new trust that was formed, the impetus to go on and inform and excite central government. And one of the benefits of COVID was that the government had granted so much money, 200 million for the North Island for Jobs for Nature, and we got the $19 million. And it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the work of the forum over all that time. So there's those beforehand, and I'm thinking particularly of Parapata and Norm Barker from the Waikato, who chaired the forum for a number of years. What I don't want to go over all that has been said, but just to say that we had a trust meeting, which we're having monthly. Last week we had one, and we had 4 applications for funding. And a lot of them involved younger people. And I'm thinking of Ngātama Wharia Marae people, or Reretakaria Marae people who put forward a proposal. And now here's a marae that has struggled over the years. And suddenly there seems to be some excitement out in the communities, and especially the Maori communities. And it's going to be about reconnecting, if necessary, or enhancing the knowledge about the Ngāhere. The medicinal values, the customs, the Maori of the forest to those people. And we're learning so much off them, and they now have some funding to do some of the things that need to be done with professional, scientific, plus Mātauranga Māori, bringing that all together. So there seems to be an upwelling, and that's where I get my greatest satisfaction from this work. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair, due to time.
Thank you, Norm. And oh, that's a thumbs up from Tito. Cool. Yeah, thank you, Louise. Hey, our third presentation this morning, which will start very soon, is on carbon farming, forestry, land use change. You talked about carbon farming. Well, have I got a deal for you in this next presentation? So stand by, stay online, listen to this, because this is big, going to be big for us as well. So I'd like to thank you for that, Louise. Thank you for that, Pam. And I'd now like to hand over to Santiago. Are you there, Santiago, for the third presentation this morning on carbon forestry farming, land use change? Where are you, Santiago? Shari, is he there?
Through you, Chair. We had arranged for him to come on at the end of the meeting. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
All right. Okay. We'll come back to that one, Louise. Sorry about that. Okay. So, people, it's 10 to 11. Can we have a 10-minute break for a cup of tea and come back, and we'll recommence just after 11 with the chairperson's report on page 29. Okay, thank you for that, and see you in 10 minutes. How are we going, Shari?
See if we have a quorum, Chair, of 7.
Cool, thank you for that, Shari. Okay, councillors, can I resume this operations and monitoring meeting? We're now on page 29, Chairperson's report. Take it as read. There's a lot of detail in there that some more information that you asked for, especially balanced fertiliser, some PFAS stuff. There's the Motiti implementation, the new Water Services Act, and I really like that diagram on page 34 where you've got the Water Services Act, the RMA, how they come together and who does what. And you'll recall that Taumata Arawai is the Bill Bayfield baby. But I like that diagram and how we're all going to interact for there. We've got some new, and you asked for in the NESF and the section 360 regulations, the update on timelines. You asked for that. And further on, a little bit of an update on Rotorua Airshed and the water shortages. And Sarah, you might like to bring us up to date on that a bit more. And also on page 37, just an update on the Provincial Growth Fund. There was a lot of information regarding all the projects around the Bay on the Provincial Growth Fund. Everything's in different stages in terms of what's been funded, what's commenced, what's finished. So there's a website that you can click on there rather than printing it down. And then a little bit on our Jobs for Nature. Wetlands Kaituna Diversion Project. Congratulations, Pim, another feather in your cap. And the project and Whakatane River Stop Bank encroachments. And then we get on to consent. So is there any questions so far on the chairperson's report? Sarah, did you want to add anything before I open it up for questions?
Nothing to add, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I've got a question, Councillor Nees.
Thank you. I've got 3 questions. Firstly, on page 32, there's mention of the Motiti protection rules. Is there a potential overlap here with the navigation safety bylaws? Is there a safety issue here which needs to be addressed in a navigation safety bylaws, or do what we have in place through the coastal plan, is that sufficient?
Sarah?
Thank you, Councillor Nees. It's not a matter that we had anticipated being raised through the navigation and safety bylaw review. The way that the rules are set out and any implications on navigation safety, really this is just about having people comply with those existing provisions. We will be seeking feedback right across the Bay, particularly in those coastal areas if there are some emerging issues. So we'll need to keep our eye on that and hear from the community if they think that it's an issue. One of the key pieces is we kind of touch on, and we have in the past for the Motiti regulations, is the impact that the closure areas have directly around the island, Motiti Island, and whether there's some conflicts of use, but we haven't got enough information at this stage to determine whether or not it's something we need to address in the review. But it is, we'll definitely keep our eye on that.
Your second question, Jane?
Yes. On what grounds have Naitarangi appealed our global consent for the minor river works? Can somebody tell me that?
Unless Chris Ingle, or I'm not sure Ruben's on the call here, my understanding is that that appeal has been made because where any works, minor or otherwise, occur in the Rohi, they would like to be engaged and involved. So we are working through that appeal right now, but we can provide further updates on that.
Chris, did you want to add?
Yes, I could add that Ngaitarangi did make submissions on the consent application. Some of those were not adopted by the commissioner who made the decisions, and it's those matters that have been brought up again for a second conversation. So I understand that rather than going to court on this, Ngaitarangi are seeking a bit of a meeting to start with, and we'll see whether there's any common ground we can work towards on that. So we're hoping that it will be an amicable settlement type thing.
Great, thank you. And lastly, and if this cannot be spoken about, please let me know. With regard to the Transpower consent being sent back to the Environment Court for reconsideration, will it be taking into account the Maka judgment for Rangatawa Bay / Ngangatapu, or will this be ruled out because that judgment didn't exist when the consent application was made in the first place?
That's an excellent question, Councillor Nees, which I can't answer right now, unfortunately. We will get Rachel Boyd to provide you with some confidential updates on that.
Yep. Any other questions on Chairperson's report, councillors? Good to see some enforcement action, Sarah, on some of those outstanding issues. And when you hear the judgments, you think, my goodness, yeah. Okay, so there's a resolution on page 29.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Andrew, go.
Page 36, when we talk about rivers and streams and groundwater, have we got any update on how TCC is dealing with the low flows for the Wairarapa scheme?
Sarah?
We're working really closely with Tauranga City Council and providing them all the best information that we have through our science, our data services, and we have direct source data from Met Service and NIWA. They've been using that data to help them with their messaging to the community about saving water. So my understanding is that they still have restrictions in place. We know that there hasn't been any significant water come into the system. So their messaging to the community remains, please be careful, please don't waste water, and they maintain that communications.
That's not the question I ask. We know there's low flows and we know there's a water problem now. The Wairarapa isn't on stream yet. My concern is that if it was on stream, we wouldn't be able to utilise that water. Have you been in any discussions on whether we need to or they need to contemplate water storage to ensure that they have water when it's needed?
Specifically for their Waiari issues, Tauranga City Council are working with ourselves and Western Bay of Plenty District Council on a future of drinking water supply piece of work, and that will really look at the long-term requirements for Waiari and the wider community, including the Western Bay. That work's only just commenced. At the moment, we are developing some terms of reference for that study, and we'll be looking to get a baseline of information, A, on what water is available for drinking water across that the district and city, and B, what the likely supply requirements are. So that's going to be a watch this space, and we will keep you updated on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And no further questions. Okay, there's a resolution on page 29 that we received the chairperson's report. I'm happy to move. There is a seconder, Councillor Thurston. Any further discussion? Raise your right hand if you're in favour. Good consensus there. Thank you for that. Motion is carried. Moving on to customer service performance report on page 47. Rachel, are you online, please, for your Customer service. Yes, you are. Hello.
Yes,
Good morning,
I am.
Rachel.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, councillors. It's nice to see you all again and to be here to provide an update on our customer service performance. The report covers the busy year that we've had in terms of customer service. We've had a massive 68,000 customer interactions across our 6 service channels. From these service trends, we can see that visits to our offices are reducing. They've reduced this year, and that digital interactions are increasing. Calls remain the most popular method of contact, and we've received close to 45,000 calls through the call centre. The report includes the progress we've made in terms of improving the service that we deliver, and this is evident in the customer satisfaction scores achieved across the different business activity areas. For maritime and consents in particular, satisfaction scores are in the vicinity of 80%, which is a really great result. We're measuring and reporting on our call resolution and call abandonment levels, and these are providing great insights into where we can make further improvements. And then finally, through the rates customer experience workstream, we're preparing for the transition to collecting our own rates and the impact that this will have on our customer service channels. The team have made great progress on this, and they're really looking forward to this change later in the year. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, so is that rates website live yet?
Yes, it is. It can be accessed, and there's quite a bit of information that's been added in terms of FAQs.
Yep, cool. Thank you for that. Councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning. On page 53 is the customer satisfaction survey results from Feb 21 to Jan 22. Yep. Is that a new survey, or is it a repeat of a previous one? What I'd like to see is a trend as we move forward. Because in isolation, it doesn't tell us a lot in terms of improvement or otherwise. So if it's a new one, that's fine. But for further reference, can we make sure that we have previous years?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Crosby. So the graph that we've shown on page 53 shows the information that we've been able to collect over the past 12 months since we've had the new Zendesk CRM system. And so as we move forward, we'll be comparing those results, back to this baseline level that we have now.
No further questions? Cool, thank you. There's a resolution on page 47. We receive your report. Thank you, Rachel. Would somebody like to move? Oh, Jane, your question? Councillor Nees?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Well, firstly, just congratulations. It's really good to see the focus and the report back on what we're doing around improving customer service and yeah, some really good messages in here. What I was interested in is that land management, and I may have misunderstood this, but land management, maritime and biosecurity don't yet use Zendesk. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Nees.
So they take their own calls and do their own reporting, do they?
So what happens currently is that all the calls are received through the call centre, and the tickets are generated through the call centre, and they're sent to those particular teams to resolve. So they are still being managed through Zendesk as a system, but it's that the teams themselves aren't part of the Zendesk system, so they don't have their own licenses and ability to then manage those tickets within their team area. And so that's another improvement that we'd like to achieve in this next period going forward.
Oh, okay, so they will be part of the full system. I was wondering whether it's because they are delivering such a specialised advice that Zendesk isn't able to cope with that, but no, you're proposing to transition them across.
Yeah, just a further rollout. Yeah,
that's great. Just the drop calls on page 50 that you mentioned, I struggled with the graph. Does that mean that 40% of our calls are abandoned? Have I got that wrong?
It's a really tricky thing to show in a graph because it captures the entire calls for that that month, whereas when we actually drill down into time periods, we can see the particular times of the day where we might be being overwhelmed by calls, and that's where there might be high levels of call abandonment. And so when we can look at those particular time periods, for example, in the morning, if there's a bus issue, we can respond accordingly at that time.
Right, so you use that to guide how much extra resources you need to provide. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Von Derelson.
Yes, on page 53 again, that graph, Pollution Hotline has the highest level of dissatisfied customers, and yet you only got responses from 56 customers. That looks proportionally light compared to the number of calls you must receive on this. And I wonder if we need to drill into that a bit deeper.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Von Derelson. It is really difficult to try and entice people to provide feedback, and at the moment those levels are really low. So we only receive about 4% of overall surveys that we send out, that we only receive about 4% of those in responses. So we're looking at ways that we can improve that response level also.
Oh, Councillor Rose, good morning.
Morena koutou, sorry for my lateness, Mr. Chair, earlier. Just been wandering around university is all. Look, my questions are around the new website that's gone up in regards to our air quality side of things, and how we've interacted with customers. Could we get an update around that as well, please?
Yep, sure. Sorry, Councillor Rose, I'm not able to comment on that at the moment, but I'll absolutely look back into it and see if we can include something in the next customer service report.
So is that the odour app you're after, Stacey? Oh, okay. Yep. Yep. Any further questions on the customer service performance? If not, there's a resolution on page 47. Would somebody like to move, please, that we receive the report? Councillor Nees, seconded by Councillor Crosby. All those in favour, please say aye, or raise your right hand. Sorry, thank you for that. Good consensus. Motion is carried. Moving on to page 57 now, and we've got the Mount Maunganui Industrial Area Update, and I believe Reese Irving is on the line. Reese, are you there? Come in, Reese. Can't see you yet. Oh, there you are. Good morning.
Kia ora koutou, Chairman and councillors. Thank you for having me join you this morning. The regular Mount Maunganui Industrial Area Update report that we report to each of the committee meetings. So it's just tabled as and taken as read, and would be happy to take any questions on this. I could also step back if required and answer Councillor Rose's question regarding the new online reporting app, if you are interested in that. If I could quickly try and share a screen, I can just give you a little demonstration perhaps. I'm not sure if that has come through.
Not yet. Oh, there it is. Yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
so what you are seeing here is Report It, the online app that we have developed, specifically initially trialing this in the Truman Lane, or the residential area of Papamoa, opposite Truman Lane, just to try and identify what what effects the odours are having on the community there. So this has been live now for around 2 months, and as you can see from the dashboard up at the top, we've had 97 users of this app to date. There's been 7 come through the app in the last 24 hours. The pink dots show the locations where people are reporting odours from, and if we can zoom in, the yellow dots are where a response officer has gone to do an odour assessment. We can click on any of these pink dots here, and that will bring us up the full details that the person who is being affected by an odour has filled in on the app. So we get their idea of the strength of the odour, the time that it happened, the date, what they think the odour smelt like to them, the type of effect it's having, etc. So it's a great new tool that has been rolled out. It allows people who, there's been a bit of reluctance, I think, sometimes people with the question about the pollution hotline telephone number. There is, I guess, an impression, some people, they just want that immediate result, and from the hotline they sometimes don't see an immediate resolution, whereas this, I think they feel, is getting their message straight through to a council response officer pretty much immediately, and we're very lucky to have that extra resource with a response officer on the ground in this area who's able to get to people's places within a few minutes of them logging their call through this app. So in the trial period at the moment, but working really well. We are still
Reece,
getting...
is that one there? That's 4 out of what? Strength of odour. What's
so
4?
The strongest that we have got is a 6. A 6 means, I can't even be on my property. I feel that ill with the odor. A 4 is basically saying, if I go outside, my enjoyment of my outdoor areas is affected by the odor that I'm being detected.
And have you got it that the complainant can tell you which way the wind's blowing on that?
Okay, so that we are working on bringing in a wind direction thing to overlay on this map. So at the moment, we do have to do the wind direction and wind strength independently of this, but it is something that the GIS team is looking into developing for us. So that will sit on. And if I just zoom out a little bit, I can just show you that we have added 2 more areas. So the area over here in Tauranga, this is really where we get that core of complaints from the Alpine, the pet food factory down in the Judea. So we're rolling this out, and we'll be doing a letter drop in this core area here so that they can start using the app. And then if I zoom down also to Te Puke, we have developed a new area down in Te Puke, just to the west of the industrial area in Te Puke, and we will be doing an information drop to the residents in that area as well, so that they can become familiar with using the app. So I hope that answers some of those questions for you.
Big Brother is watching, or Big Brother is smelling, by the sounds of it.
And can you tell us how we get there, how we download the app?
Yes, so it's in fact, it's on the BOPRC website is where the link is found, under the projects tab, and then air quality, and then the Report It app is accessible through the website.
Very good,
so
Reece.
when I use the term app, it's not actually like an app that you go into an app store and download onto your phone. You access it through the regional council website.
Yeah.
Right, I'll stop sharing that unless there's any further questions about the application.
Oh, just one. The darker the dot, is that the stronger the smell?
No, that is overlaid dots. So where it's darker, that means there's multiple calls have come from the same property, and it just puts the dot one on top of the other, so it just becomes a darker shade. So if I click on one of these darker ones, I can see there's 1 of 3. So there's 3 different times that the person at that address has reported the odor from that address. Any further questions about Report It, or I'll just take this off the screen?
No. I can't see anybody. Hold on.
Yes,
Thank you.
I do, Reece.
Matamoana, and then Stacey.
Yes. Reece, do we have a similar photograph for the Mount Airshed area?
Kia ora, Councillor McDonald. At the moment, we aren't using this in the Mount Maunganui airshed. So we don't have this exact same thing, but we can generate a map of complaint locations just from the hotline calls. So a slightly different process, but we are able to get similar detail. And there is a plan if this app proves to be worthwhile and successful and the community uptake is good, then we would be looking to expand the use of it and, have it for people who are affected by odours from the Mount Industrial area as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Reece. Look, that's answered a couple of my questions. I just wanted to ask, what do staff use to determine whether they need to send someone out? Is it just via the description that the complainant uses, or is there like a set way that you guys look at that? And then also, I'm just curious, how have you guys gone about actually setting out the zones for different areas? Because I think particularly for Te Puke, of course we can't change wind patterns, but wouldn't it be better to set up a monitoring station or a monitoring field a bit bigger than what you've done? It's just a genuine question from me. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor Rose. So at the moment, this reported app is just in a trial phase. So it's new technology, and we decided to focus initially on the area of, the residential area to the east of the odorous activities that occur in Truman Lane. So that was just our trial zone, I guess. We went to 2,500 households with our information pack, and so that was basically just to see what's the uptake going to be like and what are the public's feelings about using the app. And that's why we have now looked at expanding it into 2 further locations. And again, they are quite small community areas affected typically by one odour source, usually the pet food discharges. So that's where we've gone to in Tauranga and the one in Te Puke. The other thing, as far as monitoring is concerned, odour is quite subjective, I guess. It's difficult to pick up odour using technology that's available, particularly machine monitors. It's very much requires someone to smell something. So that is why monitoring equipment isn't really placed to try and determine odors. We can pick up on chemicals which might cause an odor, but the actual odor itself and the strength of the odor requires that human smell to determine. We try to attend to every complaint that is received either through the pollution hotline or now through the reported app. For some odours, such as the Ziwi pet food factory, we really have cut that down to we require 2 or more calls about Ziwi odour in a 1-hour period to trigger our response. If we just receive 1 call and there's nothing else in that hour, then we generally don't go there, just because the amount of resource that would require. But our goal within the response team is to attend every complaint that we receive.
Thank you, Reece.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Titaru. Yep, go.
Yep. Hey, look, it's great that we collect all this data and it gives us a good sense of where we sit in this odour space. But we've been rather, should I say, a little toothless in being able to take action in this space. And I understand, and I recall, I think it might have been Sarah said that we can now take action and follow up using various instruments. Where are we in that space at the moment? It's all good and well taking these complaints, but being able to do something about it and hold offending entities and identify them and secure a case against offending entities is important as well. So can someone update me on that? Where are we in that space?
Yes, I can do that through you, Chair. The odours, as Reece has mentioned, are extremely difficult to detect using technology. Even today, if you look across international research the best way of confirming that an odour is either offensive or objectionable is the human nose. We have been looking at a number of different options to help support our staff. It would be ideal if we could just place monitors like we do with our PM10 and SO2 networks around the Mount Industrial area. If there was a machine that we could just have a 24/7 coverage, but we don't. We have engaged one provider who has some very interesting technology to be available when we do have complaints of, as Reece noted, when someone's reporting something as highly objectionable, to get down there and see if that monitoring equipment can work to help support a case for action. At this stage, it's still evolving, but we have taken, that there's been some odour issues around certain activities in the Mount, not just the pet food manufacturing, when we have recently been able to take enforcement action. It's just frustrating for the community, we know. And we're just doing our best to make sure we can combine that technology with the international best practice, which is the human nose.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, no further questions on Mount Maunganui industrial update. You've got the two attachments there, the PM10 exceedances on 66 and the working party agenda and meeting on 68. If there's no further questions for Reece's report, would somebody like to move that it be received? Lyle, seconded by Councillor Rose. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you for that. Motion carried. Moving on to page 71, which is Maritime Summer Programme Report for 2022, presented by John. Morning, John.
Morena. Tēnā koutou, and thank you very much, councillors. I take it my paper's been read.
Yep.
And I'm happy to answer your questions.
Yep. 40% increase in interactions, John. You and your team have been busy.
Absolutely, flat out.
Is there a big increase in one area? Is it right across the bay?
Chairman, it's right across the bay, and the fact is that we've had more patrols out this season than we've ever had before.
Yeah,
including the eastern.
Sorry, you're frozen, John. Come back, John. You're frozen. Yeah, start again, John. Right across the bay.
Right across the bay, there's been a massive increase in people actually being on the water this summer. Apart from that, the fact is that we've had really ramped up our patrols, which probably also account for the numbers as well.
Yeah, so is there any questions to John taken as read his report and through the executive summary? Any questions? Oh, I can't let you go off that easy, John. Hey, in terms of the interactions, and then it comes back to the fines. So there's a lot less fines as opposed to a lot more bobs, breaches of bylaws, but you're not fining as much.
Councillor, can you hear me?
Yep.
Chairman, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Good. So the number you have on your report was as of that date. So when we issue a breach, those breaches need to be processed. So as of yesterday, we had 31 infringements, right, and that number will go up. Having said that, there are other factors which have probably affected the fact that we have breaches but lesser infringements. The fact is that we give infringements also based on the person's attitude, and we have seen a real positive increase in the people who are friendly and open to compliance. The other one is that we've never had regular patrols in the Whakatane region, and we have this time. And my instruction was, being the first real summer where we worked there to go easy on them, more of an education kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Next summer we'll go harder.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because those breaches of bylaws, staff have to review the video footage, the interaction. Yep, I understand that,
correct.
and it takes time to
That's correct.
work through all those bobs. And okay, so yep, okay, you're working through it. So questions from Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Kyoto. Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora, just a question around, you mentioned your discussions with the hapu regarding Hunters Creek. So I'm assuming that is with the whānau of Rangiwaia Island and Matakana. How have your discussions gone with them? Because it's always been a contentious issue for them around the review of our bylaws, and just wanted to know how things are tracking with the compliances and rules being kept down Hunters Creek.
So, Chairman, I'll address this to you. The fact is, Councillor, that I've made a few appointments, more than one, with people from the EV from there and Habu from there. Unfortunately, COVID has kicked in, and I've not been able to meet them. And I'm still pursuing that. We set a date for me to actually go to the island. Having said that, there's one progress I have made is in our patrol boats. I've actually employed a young man from the island. So he's part of my team now. So that's a great piece of success in my opinion. So we are going to pursue that this winter when things have calmed down for me to go there and meet with them.
Thank you.
Councillor White.
Yeah, John, thanks for your presentation. Hey, look, just a question to enlighten me on some of the guidelines here. 25% of breaches for having no name on a vessel. That's about 140 on the numbers that you provided. Is there a size of vehicle a vessel that's required before you have to have a name on the vessel? Otherwise, quite a number of my whanaunga will be in trouble.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I lost you there. Could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, here 25% of breaches for having no name on a vessel. What are the guidelines for that? I'm assuming it's dependent on size of vessel.
That's correct. And also we require to have a certain size of the letter on the boat, so it could be distinguished. And it's all there, it's very clear. And the fact is that this rule's been in play since 2017. People just find it difficult to do it or just want to ignore us.
So from my maritime time, it's any power-driven vessel over 4 meters. John has to display a name on the vessel, and it has to be 90 millimeters or more higher, and it has to be at least 2 letters or 2 numbers.
That is correct.
Okay.
Oh, spot on. Still got it, mate. Still got it.
I better remind some of my relations about that, Council.
Yeah. So we tend to, and same with registration on jet skis. Every jet ski must be registered. It's a 6-digit number, and it has to be displayed. It's about 90 millimeters high, the display numbers. So yeah, they get breaches of bylaws for not showing a name on a vessel and or unregistered jet ski.
Yeah, and just congratulations, Mr. Chair, on the launch of the new boat. We were there in Rotorua when it was blessed and sent on its way. So well done.
Yeah, we've got 3 dedicated vessels for Rotorua. Gosh, I can't remember how many in Tauranga. John, remind me.
We have 2 boats and 1 jet ski.
Yeah.
And 1 in Whakatane for now.
Yeah, for now. Okay. No, nothing further from John. Thank you for your report. Keep up the good work, because the feedback I get here in Rotorua is they love seeing the maritime patrol officers out on the water, and more please. We want to see them more on our lakes, on our rivers, on our streams, on our harbours. You know, more is better. So that gives you a bit of scope, John, for the future. But yeah, people are really conscious of people who break our bylaws, and they love to report them, and we're the police on the water. So keep up the good work, keep up the good morale within the team, and keep going. Yeah, thanks,
Thank you,
John.
Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, councillors.
So there's a resolution on page 71 that we received the Maritime Summer Patrol report. Thank you, Titaru. Moved by Titaru, seconded by Councillor Iti. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Those against, motion is carried. Right, moving on to climate change program reporting. Thank you, John. Good to see you again, sir. This is on page 82. Laverne, you're online. Perfect. Welcome to Monitoring and Ops. The floor is yours, Laverne.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, councillors. It's really good to be in a meeting where we can actually put faces again to each other. We tend to miss that from a staff perspective. From the climate change perspective, this is the 6-monthly report on the climate change program. As you all know, the funding was approved in the long-term plan against the action plan, and this is the progress report of the program delivering the projects. We have covered mitigation as well as adaptation projects, and the progress is really rewarding in terms of us meeting government requirements as well as working with our regional partners and iwi hapu through the program. So the report is there. I'd like to take that as read, and I'm happy to answer questions. I've also asked Jane Palmer to join me should you have any other questions.
Thank you for that, Laverne. And Jane, are you online? Can't see you. No. So any questions to either Laverne or Jane on the Climate Change Action Plan? Councillor Nees.
Oh, just thank you very much, Laverne. It's great to see some of those externally facing projects coming through. My question is around the upcoming national emissions budget that's coming through. And I see that we've got some discussion around this at tomorrow's annual plan workshop about perhaps putting some funding aside to do some responsive planning as a result of that. So should we not add in that extra money? What will this regional council be doing with regard to response to that emissions budget? What are staff thinking about the steps that we'll be needing to take following that document coming out, which I've got no idea what it's going to look like, whether or not it's going to provide regional targets or whether it's just going to be a very big high level budget. But what are staff thinking about that at the moment?
Thank you, Councillor Nees, for that question. Jane, I'm not sure if Jane is online with us.
Can't see her.
She's actually been involved in the response to this. However, our understanding at the moment is that it will come out as a guideline, and what we choose to do in terms of response and how speedily we can respond to some of that is what we will actually be involved with. We don't know enough yet on what is coming out of it.
Okay. Any further questions to Laverne? Jane, you're not online? No, can't. Not online. No, it's all right.
Yes, no, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, there we are. You are there, Jane.
Sorry.
Sorry. Anything, Jane, anything further you want to add to this report?
No, I think it's covered in the paper there about the projects that that are underway. Sorry, my camera's.
That's better. Yep. Okay. No further questions, councillors. There's a recommendation on page 82.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Paula. Yeah, go.
Yeah. Just a question I have in relation to tauranga carbon reduction emissions. I note in the report that there's going to be a climate plan for Tauranga completed in quadrant 2 of the 22-23 year. Is that going to address the specifics of the carbon reduction traffic transport emissions?
Jane, would you like to respond?
Yes, I'm not sure that even TCC knows the detail of that just yet. I think they're still working that through. They're getting the sustainability strategy sorted out first, and then the climate action plan will be the next step on for that, specifically focused around climate. You would hope so, but yeah, I don't have the detail on that from TCC.
I just wonder, Mr. Chairman, if in terms of the smart growth briefing that's coming up, if we could get some more detail around actually what Tauranga City is planning to do in terms of a transport emissions strategy and action plan, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think that requires a resolution. Laverne, you've got it in hand. Yep. Yep. Okay. No further questions for the climate change program reporting. There's a resolution on page 82. Would somebody like to move, please? Councillor Crosby, seconded by Councillor Rose. All those raise your right hand. Good. Consensus. Motion is carried. So moving through to the Lake Rotorua Sustainable Land Gains 2017 to 22. And this morning I've got Scott Kusabs and Helen Cray. Chris is in support. So over to you, Helen.
Morena koutou, rangatira mā. So because Scott and I are bringing a report to you just to let you know what's happened since 2017 in the Rotorua catchments in terms of land use retirement and land use gains in terms of improvements, long-term improvements for our lake. So that's focused, the report's focused mainly on the Rotorua catchment, the Lake Rotorua catchment, but also another priority for us is obviously Tarawera Lake, so we've mentioned that also. I'm going to leave the presentation to Scott, but before I do that, just want to acknowledge the recent passing of our friend and colleague Jeff Hewitt, who was a big contributor to this work, and he died unexpectedly in January. So we miss him, and I just want to acknowledge all of the work that he put in. He was a real worker and very capable. He could do anything we needed him to. So yeah, just our condolences to his whānau. So I'm going to pass on to Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Helen. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'll just share my screen here.
Perfect. Yep.
You see all that?
Yep.
Sorry, I'll need to start at the beginning.
Yeah, that's good. Progress towards sustainable nutrient loads. Perfect.
Thank you. And here it is. So the key, the presentation will focus on 3 key messages from the report and give you some visual, so you can see some of the progress we're making. The first part of it is around the rules based around nitrogen reductions and the importance of strong working relationships with landowners and delivering that. The second part will be the critical source areas and the management of phosphorus. And the third part will look at some of our environmental programs and the importance of these towards improving water quality within Lake Rotorua. So Toi Moana staff have a very good understanding of our catchment. We have in-depth knowledge of farm scale information. We've developed very good processes and data management systems that ensure a consistent approach is taken. This allows us to build strong working relationships with landowners, having knowledgeable conversations about farm systems is really important, and provides our landowners with a bit of confidence that we know what we're talking about. So all of our land management officer staff undergo sustainable nutrient management training, and it's really imperative. And we've got a lot of experience, people with a background in agriculture. You can see Rob there on the right, off a dairy farm, and now working for us, and great amount of knowledge there. So most farmers within the catchment have been compliant with the rules, and we've had really good buy-in, and they're looking for mitigation opportunities as they have to farm within their nitrogen allocation. So the decisions they're making about their farm system now, we're finding, they have to make it with that economic perspective, but also with that environmental perspective as well. The rules have enabled us access to farms, so we can have hard conversation, those hard conversations. Identifying and managing critical source areas is one of those hard conversations, and they're a very important part of improving water quality. Most phosphorus loss occurs in very short, high-intensity rainfall event that is experienced a lot of the time in the winter time. And these photos were all taken within Rotorua catchment before the rules were implemented. So you can see a badly placed water trough there. Critical source areas are visual, so they're very obvious to farmers, and we've had a high level of buy-in. The rules have identified and definitely sped up the mitigation actions that farmers are required to take. We've used a real a collaborative approach to managing critical source areas. So farmers, as you would all appreciate, have a very they're all practical people. They've got a lot of knowledge, and they've all got great ideas about how the best way to manage these critical source areas are. So we've been having good conversations and finding they're coming up with a lot of the answers. So we've had a number of large-scale environmental programs. So this one here, for instance, is in the Waititi. It's 7 hectares. It's got a large ephemeral flow path that was eroding quite badly on the along the valley floor here. This was planted 2017, this one. So you got a really good growth. This is another large gully system with an ephemeral flow path through it, and also a lot of seep sort of wetlands in here. This was all grazed prior to the rules coming in, and I've got photos of cows actually with knee deep in some of these seeps. So that is a 6 hectare gully system that's been retired. This one here was funded mostly with incentives funding, this one, and it's actually a dock scenic reserve that was leased as a dairy farm.
Yeah.
So and on the edge of Mamaku Township, 10 hectares all up in here. That was planted 2020. The old fertilised paddocks have been pretty good for plant growth, as you can see. This is a really important spring to iwi at the base of Mount Nongataha. This is Te Ahi Pukahu spring, and it was said that kaumatua who were approaching death sought the water from the spring before they died, and it is claimed that the water was clearly distinguishable from other sources. Such was its purity. So it's really an important. This was all covered in weeds, and our good friend Jeff Hewitt actually did a lot of the spraying in here, and he did the fencing along here too. This one's a large gully system on the Mamaku Plateau that feeds into the Nongataha stream. And so, yeah, that's another good example. So in conclusion, the delivery and implementation of the rules and continued momentum towards our sustainable nutrient targets rely on strong working relationships and a consistent approach is key. And I also want to acknowledge the many teams across council that support our work. You know, we've got ongoing help with the GIS team, and we've had a lot of help from various people in finding out ways in which to, you know, how to implement the rules and coming up with those systems that I was talking about. So yeah, me and Helen are available to take questions.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Helen. Question from Councillor Clark. Bill?
Scott, yeah, thank you. Scott, Helen, are you in any position to be able to comment on the proposed legislation regarding carbon sequestration and the implications of carbon credits at $80 per unit and what impact that will have in the land change use in the Rotorua catchments? And I say that looking at some of the pictures you've put up there where I see dairy farms up in that area, that my view would be on the current carbon forestry prices that actually forestry would give a far greater land return than dairying in that space. Have you had any time to think through that? Cheers.
Yes, and it's already having an impact on, we think that's what's driving the uptake of the incentive scheme and some of the smaller retirement projects. So simply because if if marginal land is retired, dry stock land is retired, or even some cases dairy land is retired, then there's a very good income from that, from carbon. So so as we expected it, that wasn't just the rules and incentives in our catchment that are driving land use change, it's these other things helping it. So that's that package of things, carbon credits, incentives, the rules, it's that all of those drivers are helping us get land use change.
Yep.
Thank
Councillor White and then Chairman Leader. Councillor White.
Kia ora, Helen. Tuatahi mihana mihi aroha ki te rangatira. Jeff, moi mai rā ki tō te ara, moi mai rā. Just to acknowledge the passing of Jeff, Helen, and to acknowledge that sincerely. Look, the question I'm going to raise is around our farmers and, what's the outcome of the review on overseer. I know that it was quite damning from the review panel, but there is we're pushing through, carrying on with overseer as a backdrop to assessment of nitrogen, of nutrients. Now, is there any kickback from farmers? Are you hearing much echo from the farmers in that particular space?
Not at all, Councillor White. Yeah, so in the Lake Rotorua catchment, which is where we primarily use overseer, all of the large scale farmers have come on board with the rules, and they've all got consents, and we've got very high levels of compliance. So I think, and certainly within the Pastoral Collective, we've met with them subsequent to the review of overseer, and there's a really good level of support for the ongoing use of it in the Lake Rotorua catchment. And saying that, the government's still working on that, the follow-up actions, and we remain hopeful that they will prove the efficacy of the continued use of overseer in the Lake Rotorua catchment, but we'll just wait to see the outcome of that, and we'll move on that as we need to. But no, we've had very little feedback on the ongoing use of overseer.
Just to follow up, if I may, Mr. Chair, if indeed there is a turnaround with overseer and deals are done on the back of information provided by overseer, is there some sort of protection and agreements around that particular space? Because once a deal is done, you don't want to go back to have to relitigate it on the basis of the accuracy of numbers, which could impact upon the value attributed to that particular deal. Is there anything thought through in that space?
Yes, so we, when the review of oversee came out, we had another look at our incentives policy, and we're making sure that what we're securing with the incentives deals is land use change. So there's a good body of evidence that says that if you retire land, if you reduce, the stock inputs, the N inputs, then you'll improve the outcomes for the lake. So that's what we're making sure our deals do, and then we can be confident that we're getting the gain that we need. Yeah, so we're securing the land use change.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Nice to see you, and regards to the team.
Kia ora.
Chairman Leader.
Thanks, Chair. Helen and Scott, where are we with facilitating or endeavouring to facilitate the critical source area management and the inevitable loss of phosphorus, and the ongoing discussion that we've had, annual plan submissions in terms of the ability to farmers to put in a really practical solution of what we refer to as detainment bunds? I know there's an issue between the engineering plus the facilitation of that outcome, but I think you'll all agree detainment bunds are a really good option here, and I think we've got to try and make them work. So where are we with trying to facilitate that? Because I understand there's a rule change, isn't there, required?
Yes, so currently our regional rules, so they can be built, they can certainly be built, and we've, in fact, my team's built a number of large detainment bunds in the catchment over the last 12 months. They require engineering, design and oversight in the construction, and that's a requirement of our rules. So that's by a chartered professional engineer. That adds a level of cost to the construction, but we certainly think that there is a need for engineering input in those, and that's what our guidelines also require. When I say that, the engineering department's guidelines also require. So we're looking at that as part of the regional plan review. So as part of the MPSFM, we'll look at whether that rule is required, and whether it can be altered to make these be implemented more widely across the catchment, and what the benefit of them is, and what the appropriate level of rule is.
So just to follow up, Mr. Chair, we all know that the real sticking point of these detainment bunds is the capital cost in terms of meeting the compliance issues. So I presume I'm asking, would you put your mind around to thinking, is there an opportunity here relative to what we're going to gain in terms of outcome for the regional council to partner with individuals on the basis of the economic benefit derived? And I don't expect a question today, but it may well be part of our annual plan.
Yep. We've got to try and get a global consent for these things, provided they're up to an engineering design standard. There's got the capital cost of the engineering design for each of these bunds is probably half the cost, Helen, and then the other half is in the construction. It's just out of whack, and we've got to find a way around it because it's our rule. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Just a bit of a curly question. When we started on Plan Change 10 was a long time ago.
15 years?
Yes.
16 years.
Yes, and 2032 seemed like an awful long way away. And it's taken a wee while for us to gain momentum, but I'm very conscious of the fact that we've got 10 years now to achieve the necessary reduction of N in Lake Rotorua. And that's necessary so that we don't have to rely on alum and other interventions like that. So how confident are staff that we're on the right trajectory to actually achieving our sustainable low by 2032?
I remain quite confident. It's going to take a lot longer than what we thought it would. Like I think it will take till 2032 to do it. We've got these other interventions coming up with the constructed wetlands and the incentive schemes making progress. I think, like I said before, it'll be other drivers that help deliver the change in the end. So the climate change, the emissions trading scheme, those other drivers will help drive land use change, which is what we need. So I think the other environmental drivers will possibly push us across the line over the next 10 years, but we're continuing to make progress. And, I think that Scott's report demonstrates an incredible amount of progress that's been made in 5 years. So, if we do that for another 10, I'm pretty confident. I am. Yeah, honestly, pretty confident.
Cool. Helen, question from me. And you attended the Lakes Water Quality Society AGM along with Doug, and a good attendance. We had a very good presentation from Dennis, our new chair for Lakes Water Quality, and Ian McLean put up a very good question at the end of it. And I've been perplexed as to how we advance his kaupapa in terms of the terms of reference for the Rotorua Te Ara Lake Strategy Group. Now, we've got a meeting on the 7th of April for that group, and I'm sure the Mayor is going to put up a resolution that we review the terms of reference for the strategy group, because Ian's right in terms of, we've been working on this for 20 years, and this summer we've seen toxic algal blooms down the Ohau Channel and toxic algal blooms in other parts of Lake Rotorua. And I'm sure, I'm confident it's water temperature related. Because out there on the water, I don't think I've ever seen water in the 25-degree range before fishing in my lifetime, and you just think, hold on, this is bigger than Ben-Hur, this is climate related. So for me, going into that strategy group meeting on the April 7th, I don't think we need a governance structure change. I think the three partners there are working, but in terms of the question that Ian McLean put up, I'd like some thinking from staff so that we can add to the flavour of the April 7th meeting before we go in terms of the review of, and I know Sir Toby put it up 6 months ago, of, where's the strategy group going to be in 10 years' time? What are we going to do once, all these sewerage schemes are in place? Where's our big drivers because we haven't I don't think we've solved the problem yet for our lakes. I just don't think we've solved it, because they are behaving very differently from what we thought they were going to behave when we started this journey 20 years ago. So it's a really big question, Helen. I'm not asking you to answer it today, but I need, and Doug will need, some ammunition for us to go into the strategy group onto the April the 7th to say, these are the big issues we've got to face for the next 20 years for the strategy group. So that's my big question for the day.
Okay. Yep, we can definitely have a think about that. I haven't thought about it too much since Thursday, but can definitely do that before the strategy group.
Do you concur, Doug? Yeah. Okay. Right. Are there any further questions on, where am I? Lake Rotorua Sustainable Land Gains 2017 to 2022, the report there from Scott and Helen. Are there any further questions? Very good reporting, Helen. Thanks for the acknowledgement of Jeff. Yeah, I see his work everywhere, eh? Yeah. I mean, those weed cordons. I mean, who the hell would have thought, how do you build a weed cordon? It's never been done before. Well, give Jeff a sewing machine and a few flotation devices and he'll build one for you. And you think, wow, that's pretty cool. That's really cool.
I believe he purchased an old Singer sewing machine to do that. Yeah,
I've seen it. I think it was foot powered too. One of those, those up and down foot powered ones, because I've seen them on it. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions on that No, if not, would somebody like to move the report
I
on
move.
page, thank you, Titaru, on page 89, seconded by Lyle. Any further discussion? Please raise your right hand to support that resolution. All those in favour? Yep, cool, that's a consensus. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Scott. Superb. Keep up the good work.
Kia ora koutou.
Okay, moving on to page 103 and my good friend Greg Corbett. You're online, Greg. Welcome along. Biosecurity activity budget trends 16 to 21. So this is more information out of the last meeting, councillors, that Greg's compiled on just how much money, how much more money we are spending on these rat bags across our Rohi in terms of pest management. So welcome along, Greg. Floor's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. As the Chair just alluded to, this is a report that was requested by the committee at its last meeting in December. I do have a short presentation that just highlights each of the graphs which are in the report, and happy to take questions as we go through, Chair.
Yeah, go for it, Greg.
I'm hoping that's coming through now.
Good as gold.
Thank you. Right, yeah, so I'll just quickly just go through the graphs and the key points from the paper that's in front of you at the moment. So looking at the biosecurity activity overall, you can see there's just a growing trend through to 2019-20, and then this really big jump, which really indicates two things. Firstly, the Jobs for Nature money that was coming through for wallabies and wilding pines, but also don't forget that the council committed an extra $600,000 to the biosecurity activity for the 2021 annual plan. If we were looking at our programs, and I've grouped the pests according to our current RPMP, and it's just acknowledging that we had the change in December 2020. So I've just had to rearrange some of our pest programs to group them into the current RPMP programs. But both the exclusion and the eradication programs are showing that same big jump in the last financial year. We have had, for the exclusion program and new to region surveillance work, we have had quite a bit of an increased focus in the last couple of years there, looking for not just new to region pests, but also these garden escapees or naturalised pests. So these are things that are adapting to the New Zealand environment and now breeding naturally in the wild. And that surveillance has turned up over 100 new things that are potentially weeding. Not all of them will be, but they're just showing some of that potential. And we have a number of those that are undergoing more formal risk assessments at the moment. On the eradication program front, again, the increased funding has, maybe not surprisingly, increased our levels of surveillance, and that in turn has discovered new sites where eradication pests are present. But it is pleasing to note that 61% of our current sites where we know eradication pests are or have been present are now at what we call zero density. So therefore, there is no detectable plants or animals at those sites. It's not to say that we've got the last one, but they are not at breeding populations. All the flowers and seed heads are being removed to stop any future breeding there. So that program is tracking reasonably well. Progressive containment. Again, really the big jump there in the last years around the Jobs for Nature funding with wilding pines, and that enabled over 500 hectares of wild pine work to be done in the last year. So again, yeah, a significant jump for that program. With the two programs with sustained control and progressive containment, a lot of our plant pest inspections are tied up in these two programs, and that increased funding has seen our plant pest inspections increase by 250% over the report period, and the number of infestations detected through that additional surveillance has increased as well. Moving on to some of the key pest trends. Firstly, aquatic pests, and we've just been talking about Jeff Hewitt. Well, his name's written all over the work around the aquatic pests as far as council's operational input here. At the catfish trends there, as we see this, the orange bars there show the number of nets set, and the blue graphs the number of catfish actually caught. And then the grey line is showing the trend line, which is what we call the capture per unit effort, which is basically just the number of catfish caught per net night. And this has shown some interesting but inconsistent trends. We look back to 2019, very COVID affected season in March and April 2020, which reduced our number of nets set, but we caught a huge number of fish, and that had us really worried that the catfish population had really jumped away from us. However, the following year we set slightly more nets, again a COVID affected year, but our catch rates are right back down. So at the moment it's really hard to say what exactly is going on there, but it could be that our netting effort is having some impact on just containing or maintaining the catfish population at maybe not a low level, but stopping it from really jumping away. The other bit of work that we were able to kick off with the new funding from council was our collaboration with Te Arawa Lakes Trust in boat and trailer compliance at boat ramps, and over the last summer and a half so far, over 2,000 odd boats and trailers have been inspecting with really good levels of compliance, really. So there's only been 26 detected there carrying weed when they've turned up the boat ramp. So while any one of those boats could potentially cause a new infestation, the fact that the levels of compliance are actually quite high is encouraging. Onto marine pests. This is another program which seems to be going reasonably well. We've had not significant increases in funding, but we've made really good progress against clubbed tunicate, and those populations have really dropped away in the last 2 or 3 years. Unfortunately, Mediterranean fanworm, we can't say the same. They have been slowly trending upwards. Admittedly, the number of sites where they're present is still quite low. And a site could be a boat that's been detected arriving in Tauranga that's infested, or it could be fanworms that have jumped from a boat and now growing on pontoons or structures around marinas. So some of these sites that have come in where they are arriving vessels, as long as that vessel is treated straight away, are not necessarily a significant issue. You'll also note there significant revenue trends that relates to our work that we're doing for our neighbouring regions, supporting their marine biosecurity work, which in turn helps provide protection for the Bay of Plenty, and we apply cost recovery for that service that's provided to our neighbours. Wallabies, again, you'll see a really big jump in work over the last year, which is not surprising with the Jobs for Nature coming through. The map on the right-hand side of the slide there shows the area of work that's been covered over the last year and a bit, which obviously is a huge jump up from where we were operating. This program is a collaboration with our neighbours in Waikato, and at the moment you'll see there actually quite a lot of the work is focused in Waikato, where they are receiving wallabies dispersing from our region. The map there may show a jumble of lines. They are areas that have been walked by dog teams. There's a couple of areas in the Tikopia and the Hora which represent aerial 1080 operations. There were further aerial operations up in the Mamakus early this year, which are yet to be added. And the little dots are showing either wallaby kills or wallaby finds by the dog and cameras. this program is still in its early stages, and we are still facing levels of concern with landowners around toxin use, which is taking some time to work our way through. And this is also complicated by the fact that when we do get approval from landowners, we have quite a few issues currently with the health department in processing our permits that we need prior to using likes of cyanide or 1080. Obviously, the health department have some quite high priorities around COVID at the moment, and that's occupying their fort and staff time. So some of the processing time around those permits is taking a lot longer than is desirable. And we've also still working through with a number of Māori land trusts around their desire to have their rangatahi participating in delivering wallaby work. And there is challenges just around how do we build sustainable work programs for teams and building up teams. And there's the thoughts around that people who have been out there shooting wallabies can go and do the work is they may well be able to do the work, but complying with the health and safety from MPI and the reporting needs is another thing. And typically we would see that it takes about a year of training to bring people through from having an interest in shooting and poisoning possums through to being a really high functioning pest control personnel. But we are working on that with MPI and the Department of Conservation at the moment. Wild kiwi fruit, the committee will be aware that we entered into a new partnership agreement with KVH for the management of wild kiwi fruit last year. And you'll see that there's been a jump in expenditure from us to support that. We are now providing KVH with an agreed $115,000 a year to support the control of wild kiwi fruit. KVH are matching that fund, and they've also managed to attract additional funding from Zespri for that work. This has resulted over the last year 140% increase in the properties controlled and a significant increase in the number of vines controlled. And that increase is quite pleasing, given that they have deliberately focused on some of the very steep, hard to get to places in the last year. So there's been a lot of abseiling work and focusing on areas which are several hectares of just matted kiwi fruit vines. And then the last slide I got here is just showing the trends on our woolly nightshade work. And over the last 5 years, largely thanks to the increased funding from council, we're seeing a dramatic increase in the work focused on woolly nightshade. Nearly a 350% increase in woolly nightshade focused inspections. And the recent development of GeoPest, our new data management tool, has been able to now show that we're through those inspections there. We've got 30% currently of the properties inspected are compliant. A further 28% are working on woolly nightshade control, and 42% are currently non-compliant. Obviously those 42% are still a work in progress, but at least now we've got really good data management tools to allow us to track that compliance work. And that, Mr. Chair, is my report. Happy to take any questions.
Very good, Greg. Can you stop sharing? Yeah, no, good. Mr. Clark, question from you. Oh, no, it's just a thumbs up, Bill? Or
No, I'm sorry, question from me. Yeah, absolutely.
Question.
Greg, forgive me, I'm going through a current carbon obsession, but I've been doing some back of the envelope calculations on the consumption by feral animals of biomass in the Bay of Plenty. And I've come up with a figure of around about 800 tonne a day of green biomass consumed across the board by possums, deer, pigs, goats, etc., and wallabies. Now, obviously, you've got access to far better data than I have. Would you be in any position to be able to do a bit of a back of the envelope calculation on just how much biomass is consumed daily, because I kind of think that in the context of carbon sequestration in our rohi, it's something that's been totally overlooked. What is the value of lowering the amount of feral animals destroying our native biomass as opposed to carbon offsets? It's an interesting little position. So any assistance would be appreciated.
Oh, Mr. Clark, you have got carbon on the go today. My goodness. Greg, big question.
Yes, I would have to go away and have a look at that. I'm sure that we'd find that between the Department of Conservation and MFE and others, that there would have been some estimates done on what pest animals are consuming.
Yeah. So report back, Greg, because this is we'll be discussing this afternoon again and again tomorrow in terms of carbon pricing. Councillor Nees, your question?
Oh, not a question, just a big thank you
right.
to Greg for that report. It's really great to see the trends, but also the increased activity. It's all about bang for bucks and value for money. So I thank you very much for the report.
And a long-term question for me, Greg, is that Jobs for Nature for wallabies is going to be finished in 4 years' time. We're not going to solve this problem in 4 years' time. Louise from Manaaki Kaimai has some similar problems in terms of long-term funding for the work that they're doing on that 240,000 hectares of Kaimai Mamakus. So we need some long-term thinking about how we're going to sustain these gains that we've got over the next 4 years and continue with them, because we cannot stop. To turf out the wallaby program after 4 years would be an absolute tragedy of huge proportions, and within 10 years they'll be back to where they are today. So some long-term thinking, Greg, from you and your team about how do we sustain these programs once Jobs for Nature is over, because that's going to be mindful for ourselves tomorrow in our long-term funding programs.
Yeah, for you, Mr. Chair, the good news is that Treasury have currently committed 6.9 million per year after the June 2024. So that's ongoing funding for wallaby control.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's news. Oh, gosh. So that's for the same... So that's for the 6.9 million for the whole of New Zealand, or is it? Yeah. Oh, that's okay. Well, gosh, I should ask these questions more often, Greg. Get an answer like that. Anyway, I'm sure Louise will be listening in online and listening to that sort of thing too. So, okay, right. Any further questions to Greg from his ramping up the biosecurity right across the board? Thank you, Greg, for that presentation. It certainly shows that we're putting our money where our mouth is, and in terms of feet on the ground, getting rid of, you name it, we're getting rid of it.
Thanks, councillors.
Yeah, thanks for that. There's a resolution, people, on page 103. If somebody like to move that the report be received. Thank you, Jane. Seconded from Bill. All those raise your right hand. Yep, good consensus there. Thank you for that. Motion is carried. Thank you, Greg, and keep up the good work. Right. It's the penultimate is the overview of the wastewater treatment compliance in the Bay of Plenty region for 21-22. So this is Alex Miller on page 114. Alex, are you there? Come in, please, Alex. Yes, you're coming online. Morning, how are you?
Morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. And kia ora koutou, Councillor.
Oh, no, it's afternoon, sorry.
Afternoon, yes.
Yeah.
You've thrown me. So yeah, I'd just like to introduce the annual wastewater compliance report for 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
Obviously, you'll see in the agenda report, we've also got a bit of an update on the year to date so far. So along with that, I'd also like to introduce May Triglintes, who is the author of the overview report. She's joined us in the last, I'd say 6 months now, actually. I don't know the exact date, sorry, but she's taken on the role for our Three Waters compliance, which was previously filled by Jess, who would have presented this the last few times.
Yes.
I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'll just run through a couple of the key themes that we saw coming out of this report and this kind of analysis. And then I'm happy to take any questions. So what you'll see from the report is obviously there are still some challenges when it comes to compliance for the wastewater treatment plants that the TAs are having to come up on. A lot of that is linked to the same ongoing issues that they have with infrastructure, and those are really being dealt with at a much bigger level through the Three Waters reform as well. That being said, what was encouraging this year is that we have seen improved levels of compliance, and we're also starting to really see some good results coming through in terms of the response to network overflows, and I'll talk through that in a few minutes as well. So yeah, the general compliance across the board was a slight improvement on last year with a bit less significant non-compliance. The significant issues which you'll see identified through the report were out of Katikati, which relates to the monitoring and management of their outfall, some issues to do with monitoring at Makatu vermicomposting, which is run by a third-party operator. There's some challenges with that, I believe. There are still some ongoing concerns with Kawerau District Council, and we're continuing to work with them pretty closely on their plant. What's been really encouraging there is that obviously you'll remember there were some significant issues with their plant and the discharge quality that occurred as a result of connecting up the dairy factory to that. What we have seen is that KDC, in particular at the staff level, have been really strong in their response to the dairy factory and have been much more careful with what they receive into the plant. So there have still been a couple of issues that have come up through the year, and you'll see we've responded to that with a few infringement notices. But generally that response is in a much better place than it was a couple of years ago when that issue was first emerging. There's also a number of challenges with the Opotiki system at the moment, which they are actively working through. So they've engaged Opus to do a lot of work on their behalf to try and get those issues resolved as soon as possible. Outside of the wastewater treatment plants, again, there's just ongoing issues in relation to overflows, and a lot of that is to do with the challenges of running older networks. And you'll see in places like Tauranga, obviously there's a lot going into replacing some of that infrastructure at the moment. The common issues that we hear for network overflows continue to be things like fat and grease buildup and waste buildup from things that have been flushed, in particular wipes. You'll see in the report that we've highlighted a couple of significant overflows that came up. In particular, there was the one that occurred in Nongataha in March 2021, where an illegal connection into the stormwater accidentally drilled into the wastewater scheme. And then a subsequent one in Matapihi where there was an overflow from the southern pipeline. What was really encouraging with those, so we did full-scale investigations into that, handed those over to our senior investigators to have a look in detail. What was really encouraging in those and in pretty much every other overflow throughout the year is that the uptake of the best practice guidance document that we developed with district councils 18 months ago, which has now been fully signed off, and that really mandates the response that councils have to take when these overflows occur. It includes things like iwi notification, toitiora notification, how they clean up, how they monitor, how they advise us. And the benefit of that is that we can have some assurance that the impacts of those unforeseeable incidents are being really well managed. So if you look at the Matapihi example, something to the effect of 97% of the material that was discharged was able to be sucked up and removed off-site before it could reach the heart. And there was consistent monitoring after that to ensure that there were no ongoing impacts. So it's really good to see that level of response being taken up. And lastly, the area that this work kind of touches is obviously around reticulation and our continued advocacy for reticulation to proceed in those communities where on-site treatment is not really a viable option. And we are seeing it's good to see some progress out of Tarawera and Matata as well, with those schemes sort of starting to move into next stages from where they were respectively before that. So those were the main points I really want to highlight. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to do my best to answer them. And if I can find you an answer and come back to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alex. Yeah, it's those network overflows that on page 116 that worry me. Yes, you've got best management guidelines for all the TLAs to follow, and they are following them. But I look on the numbers on that table there, 63 from Tauranga, 37 from Rotorua, 30 from Whakatane. So the overflow incidents, can you break them down? And this is not for today. Can you break them down into infrastructure failure, or is it human intervention? And I call, the likes of grease buildups and wet wipes and all those blockages, they're the human side of things. Or contractors hitting the pipe unbeknown to themselves, like at Matapihi. So can you break those down to being infrastructure failure and or the human side of it for me at some point in time? And
absolutely.
And are you satisfied? Are you satisfied that the best practice guidelines for TAs to follow in the reporting and management of overflows, are you satisfied that's the best they can do? Is that the best guidelines we've got?
That's a thorny question, but the shortest answer I can really give you is I think yes. That guideline was developed only 18 months ago.
Yeah.
It takes into account ensuring that infrastructure is actually well maintained to the best of the ability that infrastructure is capable of being maintained.
Yeah.
It considers all of the aspects in the response as well, and all of those things need to be all of those boxes need to be ticked. And beyond that, we still have a decision-making function around whether or not there should be enforcement action in relation to it. So the best practice guideline is not an approval for a discharge or a set of conditions that authorises or approves a discharge. So there's still a check and a balance in there.
Yeah.
But what it does do is it really sets that expectation that, we understand that these discharges can happen and do happen, and it is an issue when managing a network. We've been through the process of looking if those can be consented, and the legal advice is that we shouldn't go down that road. And this is, I do think this is probably the best tool that we can put under that. And I'm confident that it was developed pretty robustly with our hand in that, as well as Toi Te Ora and the district councils operating it, and in consultation with tangata whenua as well as to their role.
Okay, all right. Chairman Leader.
Thanks, Chairman. Alex, a comment and then a couple of questions. So this is a good report, but as you said, only a minor improvement on what it was last year. And the reality is this deals with current consents. And as you outlined in here, there are a lot of these consents coming up in the next 3 years in particular, and the new standards we know are going to be significantly higher. The comment about the aged infrastructure is appropriate. So anybody reading this would come to the conclusion that the need for reform as being proposed by the Minister is blatantly damn obvious. A couple of questions I've got here. Do you know, this sort of report, do you know whether councillors of the respective territorial authorities get this material in terms of the challenge in front of them? Because In particular, down the east here, each of the territorial authorities are pushing vehemently against the reforms and saying, we're all right, Jack, when they're probably the worst performers. And so do councillors know this, or do they understand it? And secondly, you make comment in here in terms of bridging resource consents. Now, I understand in here it's to do with Rotorua, but going forward, if you take Portakey, for instance, resource consent coming up in 25, is it best practice to have a bridging consents that may get you from 25 to 30, or should the applications for those resource consents that are expiring in a 3 to 5 year period start being processed now?
Thanks, Chairman Leader. So to answer your first question, we do pass this report on to staff at the district councils. Whether it makes it up from them to councillors, I'm not entirely sure. I'm certainly happy to ask. Alternatively, if we can provide this in a format, or if it's worth presenting to the Eastern Bay plenty leaders, then that's something we could certainly look at. The bridging consent for Rotorua is, I'd need to talk to the consents to Ruben about just what the technicalities of that, but I will say that the Rotorua District Council issue is somewhat unusual in that they initially had their previous consent, which set out some really clear expectations for getting out of the forest, how they got out of the forest, and dates to apply by. And that also set in motion some consultation for a different approach for the discharge. What emerged through that was the proposal to discharge to the lake following I think it was a land contact bed and an increased level of treatment. That was submitted directly to the Environment Court, ultimately withdrawn. So there was something a little unconventional in there. The bridging consent is really something to give them to maintain those Section 124 rates just while they go through having to change that. I would say with a reasonable level of confidence that's not a practice that we would expect to see across other consents. We can't, under the current circumstances, change what Section 124 of the RMA requires us to do in terms of allowing for a consent to continue to be in effect after it's expired when an application is in play. But what we have done is we've engaged with those councils that are reaching the 2026 date. In particular, you're quite right, that affects Whakatane District Council the most, with I think 3 discharges to freshwater that currently have very few limits on them. Sorry, 4. We are working with them as best we can to try and help encourage them towards the consenting process. And at last touch, they were fairly engaged, progressing that as best they could. And obviously, we've got to also consider that the reform and where that will sit in terms of entities will overlay on top of that as well. But in the meantime, the engagement with them has been pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Alex and Sarah, a very, very good report on a, dare I say, a fascinating subject in parenthesis. But having said that, it's further to what Chairman Leader said in terms of the level of understanding and in-depth knowledge and appreciation of the size of the problem within our TLAs. So just reassure me that this report in various forms is shared with the TLAs so that there's a high level of understanding, and I'm thinking here particularly within the RLC Council, of the size of the problem. Okay, they're grappling with issues, and we know we've had issues up behind us here, but going forward, the level of understanding in terms of the size of the problem.
Thanks, Councillor Thurston, and yeah, I can absolutely confirm that it was passed on to RLC staff as well. And we do also have another forum with the TAs, which we try and keep touch with at a management level as well on these topics. So we'll continue to try and make sure they are engaged and aware of these issues.
But my concern is, just following on a supplementary, is it's not only sharing it with the officers in these TLAs, it's filtering it down to the politicians, which I think is
critical. And I think of a lot of the problems that we've encountered here in Rotorua would not have occurred if our politicians had been fully up to speed with the size of the issue. So to say that, you know, that's commendable that we're sharing it with the officers. But have we got proof that it's actually appearing on an order paper in the council meeting, ops and monitoring type of function going forward to the politicians? That's my big concern. And Sarah, I'd love you to find that out for us if you can.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Thurston, we will do that. And also just an offer, I think, reiterate what Alex put on the table, is if we could support your conversations at all with councils and councillors in your area, please let us know. We can come and present at the relevant council meetings with you and provide this information. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And further to this, at the next Rotorua Lake Strategy Group meeting, I've asked for a report on the infiltration beds proposal that RDC is putting forward in terms of on CNI iwi land, as opposed to the contact beds that they were proposing, Alex. And so there'll be an update in April 7 for that as well. So once that presentation comes through, I'll share it with all councillors, because you'll be keen to see what they're proposing to do, because I don't know yet what they're proposing to do in terms of the waste disposal for 25 million litres of water a day. Okay.
Chairman, just at your discretion, could I just pose a question I got out of reading these papers? So in here, during an early period, a brand new facility like Rotomar East Rotoiti behind Emery's store there had non-compliance. And to me, that is really interesting. Apparently a state-of-the-art plant had non-compliance. And I'm just wondering whether, you know, when we move to a position where you have really technically competent people who can help and assist managing these sort of facilities, where they should sit, you know, should they sit within a territorial authority? Should they sit within a regional council? Because it's not our problem to solve it. It's our problem to monitor the performance. When you think of the issues we've got with Tarawera East Rotoiti, it was really surprising.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, brand new plant and it had issues. Yes. Yeah. Only cost $10 million or some ballpark figure, something like that, and they have issues. Right. Just for the overview of the wastewater treatment plant compliance in the Bay region, page 114. Can I have a mover that we receive that report from Alex and May? Hello, May. I haven't seen you online yet, but welcome to Monitoring and Ops. And do I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Crosby. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Gosh, have we still got a quorum? I'm struggling with. Oh, yeah, Toy, you're still online. Come on, people, you've got to turn your monitors on, because if you haven't got your monitor on, we haven't got a quorum. Yeah, thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, Shari. Consideration of item not on the agenda. So now we go back to Santiago's presentation, and this is this late addition to the agenda. It's on carbon forestry farming, and Bill Clark will have speaking rights at the end. But Santiago, are you online for this? And who's going to introduce you? Is it just you, Santiago? Yeah, go for it, mate.
Tēnā koutou, good afternoon, councillors. Yep, so as the chair just pointed out, this was a relatively late addition to the agenda. And the purpose, as I understand it, is just to give you a heads up about a conversation that is unfolding at the national level at the moment regarding forestry and carbon farming. It is fair to say that it is quite a complex and wide-ranging issue. So within the next 10 minutes that we have today, it's just going to be an introduction and a summary of a couple of discussion papers that have been released by central government, and also an earlier paper commissioned by a number of district councils and Beef and Lamb and prepared by Lawrence Yule. And yep,
Santiago, I can see you, but I can't see your screen yet.
Sorry.
Still a blank. There's still a blank screen. Can you? What your presentation? There we are. There, that's better.
Can you see the black screen, or can you see the full screen?
No, I can see forestry and carbon farming monitoring ops 8th of March. Perfect.
Okay.
Carry on.
That's good. So I'll just start with a graph. This is the data behind this graph comes from the default lookup tables for the Bay of Plenty under the ETS. So you can see that pine grows a lot faster than native and sequesters carbon a lot faster than native. On top of that, the cost of establishing native is about 10 times, give or take, higher than establishing pine. And in addition to that, most recently, we've seen the price of carbon under the ETS more than triple, from about $25 per ton or per unit in early 2020. And last week, it just went across $85 per unit. It has dropped back down to 75 more recently. But these two things put together, in addition to the really high cost to establish native, what happened there? Are essentially driving what some people have described as a wave of pine sweeping across the country. It's probably fair to say that in our region, we haven't seen that wave of pine come through as strongly as it has done in some other regions. But the reason for these two discussion papers by central government and a number of district councils and beef and lamb is essentially this concern of permanent exotic pine under the ETS, replacing a lot of productive land, also undermining efforts to address gross greenhouse gas emission reductions. There are concerns about what this large monoculture of pine would mean in terms of a range of risks for the environment, for biosecurity, for pest management and fire. And of course, also what impact this would have on local communities, local employment, export earnings, etc. It is fair to say that there is wide agreement on the problem overall, with the likes of the Climate Change Commission recommending that government look at how they manage the amount of land that is going into pine. The environmental sector has raised that issue as well, and obviously the farming sector shares those concerns too. There are, however, different opinions on the extent and significance on some of some of these implications, but we won't get into that right now. So the two discussion papers, the MFE MPI discussion paper and that Yule report, propose a range of potential solutions to this problem. The central government proposal is effectively to ban exotic forestry from a new category under the ETS of permanent forestry. So these new categories treating permanent forestry separately from production forestry, and Yule also recommended the same thing. They're also proposing some technical changes to how carbon is accounted for under the ETS. That's in relation to production forestry. The central government discussion paper also flags the need for additional incentives for native forestry, but it's not specific about what exactly it is that they're proposing, other than something might be needed in the space. Central government has also flagged that later in the year, they will be consulting on creating additional powers for councils to control where forestry or permanent forestry can and can't go. And the Yule report also addressed that. It wasn't very clear, but it sort of suggested rules based on land use capability. Central government also flagged that there's already a lot of work underway in terms of reviewing overseas investment rules in forestry, and Yule also recommended that. Yule also recommended putting limits on how much offsetting can be done from ETS units coming from forestry, and the point of that would be to force ETS participants to look at their gross emissions rather than just offsetting them. And finally, Yule also suggested additional rules for how permanent forests are managed, whether that is through an NES or otherwise. just some considerations, particularly in relation to that proposal from central government to ban exotic species from that permanent forestry category. In the absence of additional incentives for native forestry, and this is bearing in mind that the funds from Jobs for Nature and 1 billion trees are already exhausted, and that's been touched on earlier today, that would could potentially affect sequestration efforts that are mainly happening through pine at the moment, and therefore the country's net emissions, if we don't replace the sequestration that is currently happening with pine with something else. Regarding the second point, there are different opinions about these, but some concerns have been raised about preventing projects that are looking to progressively transition from pine to native and using pine essentially as a cover crop or a so harvesting pine rather than clear felling, doing it selectively and transitioning to native over time. Another issue that has been raised, and this also affects our regional carbon sequestration project in our climate change action plan, is the ability to use ETS revenue from pine. It's been referred to as rocket fuel to subsidize native plantings, and it sort of relates to my earlier point. Then establishing natives is a lot more expensive. Another issue that has been raised is by preventing the use of pine mainly and exotics generally in that permanent ETS category, it could make some mitigation activities, thinking about water quality, a lot more expensive. It was touched on briefly in Scott's presentation earlier, but there's been a lot of conversion to pine in Lake Rotorua that has helped to address the nitrogen reduction target there. So this proposal from central government, in the absence of additional incentives for native forestry, would make that sort of initiative quite a lot more expensive and a lot less viable. And we could probably say the same about areas that are in pasture at the moment, but that are highly erodible and probably not suitable to be in pasture. Another area of uncertainty is how the emissions pricing regime for agriculture will treat on-farm forestry. So this is another consultation that is going on at the moment, and it's a regime that will be separate from the ETS. And they flagged in this consultation document that they would recognize vegetation that is not recognized in the ETS within this regime. So if central government excludes permanent exotics from the ETS, presumably they could be picked up by this regime, but there's no certainty about that at the moment. Another point that has been raised is the merit of other species that are not pine, so the likes of Douglas fir, redwood, etc. At the moment, the focus seems to be on pine, even though the proposal is to ban all exotics from that category. One thing that I was quite pleased to see in the MPI MFE consultation document is that they have been explicit about meeting a number of objectives, including those listed there. I think when people just focus on one of the objectives, like for example, community vibrancy, and forget about everything else, chances are we're not going to come up with a very good outcome. Something that the MPI and MFE discussion document didn't do, however, in my opinion, is they didn't look at options other than this ban, which you could argue could potentially be quite blunt in some cases. One option could be a way of levying income from the ETS for pine plantations to subsidize natives and sort of put them both on a level playing field. So in terms of next steps, we could provide a response to the UL report. I'm assuming we would be providing a submission to central government, and we will also be keeping a watching brief of how these proposals and the national conversation develops in terms of how this would affect our own work within council. At the end of this presentation, I have also included some hyperlinks to the discussion documents themselves and some commentary that's already been sort of happening in the media about this issue. So I'll hand over to Councillor Clark for any concluding remarks.
Thank you, Santiago. Can we have, back online. Thank you for that. Yeah, good food for thought. Good food for thought. I like that your report, and yeah, he's posed a few good questions. So, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, kia ora, Tim. This actually is huge, potentially, not only in the national landscape, but particularly the Bay of Plenty landscape. I've got pages and pages of notes down to how much wallabies eat today, to a whole range of things. But for my own sanity, I've actually kind of drafted a statement that kind of summarises it with a view to going forward for further discussion. So I'll read it to you and then go and have my lunch. I've been following the concept of carbon inclusive farming for a number of years. I recall around 3 years ago recommending that this council seriously consider investing in this concept at that time. Carbon credits were trading at $22 a unit. Now it has reached $80 a unit. As is often the case, the market has moved well ahead of the regulatory process. The government has now proposed legislation that will give guidance to the development of carbon sequestration, and that will provide assistance in achieving its goals that are committed to under the International Climate Change Accords. The proposed legislation will have a significant impact on hill country, economy, landscape, and biodiversity. The implications for us as a council with its environmental responsibilities are far-reaching, and I propose that we have a workshop where we can examine all aspects of the government proposals in depth. In particular, we should examine if there is an investment opportunity for this council that assists responsibilities in the climate change and nitrogen reduction in the Rotorua catchment. I have got an awful lot more stuff there up my sleeve, a lot of facts and figures that are totally current. The legislation is still impending. We do need a workshop around this because I think Santiago and I agreed we could spend all day talking about this. It's going to be a big mover in our biodiversity and native restoration. It's going to have a huge impact on the whole economies of the Bay of Plenty. I mean, the simplest thing is currently the prospect of carbon farming has added 50% to the capital value of a sheep and beef farm. And so that's going to be massive. Te Taru, you can smile, there will be massive implications for Murray Land Trust and cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, thanks. Propose you, we set a date for a workshop and garner as much info we can. It's going to impact on how we do business in this space. So, kia ora.
Thanks, Bill. Te Taru, you had a question, and then Councillor Chairman Leader.
Kia ora, Santiago. Thanks for your comments. And Bill, you hit it on the head. Been involved with the Overseas Investment Office and Treasury on discussions around overseas investment in this particular space, and they're moving legislation to having to prove value to New Zealand rather than run the gauntlet of special tests. That was one of the issues that I've been in. But I've also been involved in some of the conversations at a national level with iwi. And that's one of the things that's missing from your conversation, the impacts on iwi. Because a lot of land is marginal land that iwi have. Of the 5% that they have, a lot of it's marginal land. Look at the East Coast. What have they got? The only option they've got is to grow trees to actually create some generation, some economy for them. And it's huge for them. It's really huge. And for Māori, actually, the focus is on we'll plant pine trees on areas that are best suited to trees, in this case trees, because it actually adds to their economy on land that has been marginal for them. So this is a huge issue. And I've noted a conversation with James Shaw. Yes, they want to look at removing it from the ETS, permanent forests. But I also note moves from James Shaw that this is just a discussion document. No firm decisions have been made, and they acknowledge the potential for unfair treatment of Māori land. And I think that's a big issue to be considered in this space. And you raised it, Bill. And I will be very much looking deeply at this. There's a newly formed New Zealand Forestry Association that's emerged, and it's led by Te Kapunga Jews. And he was the ex-CEO, by the way, of Pia Volson. And there's a big move, certainly from Ngāti Porou and actually within Te Arawa and other places for a greater understanding of the impacts on iwi land and what it will do to their economic options. And so there's a big discussion to be had in that area, Santiago. Yes, iwi want to contribute to the environmental benefits, They have no objections, obviously, to native trees. They didn't remove the native trees initially. So they're actually arguing, well, okay, we've got exotics now. We can actually make something of this in the current environment. Let's have a discussion. And so I'm sort of semi over this, and I'll be interested in how this is progressing, particularly through the regional council and other councils. So that's just my opening salvo, Kevin.
Thank you, Te Taro. Chairman Leader.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, could I firstly thank Santiago and Bill for attending that forum on my behalf, because I wasn't able to get there, even though the invite came to me. Look, I think this is, and it's all, what Te Taro said is essentially where I was going to come from. This is the real policy issue sitting behind this is not in the next 2 years, 10 years or 20 years. The real policy issue is 50 to 60 years out. And you compare plantation forestry, which essentially is about recovery and selling, as opposed to carbon farming, which is increasing the number of stems that you plant per hectare and essentially walking away from it after 50 or 60 years. Now, if you take what we refer to as that real difficult or tiger country down the East Coast and around the Cape, a lot of that country there, in 50 years' time, the cost of recovery, or even now, the cost of recovery means there's marginal returns to the landowners. So I think, you know, someone needs to put their heads around. I won't be here in 50 years' time, but someone needs to put their heads around and think that, you know, a future generation might look back and say, why the hell did someone allow all that intensive planting to take place on that country where it's not going to be recovered? Because ultimately it's all going to erode, degrade. And I think I've heard some commentary from some people say, oh, the natives will come through when the others fall down. Well, it might be a hell of a long time coming. And when you increase the stem density, I think it's about double of what you do for plantation forestry. Therein lies the problem. Good for carbon harvesting, but I don't think for environmental outcomes it's going to be that good, Kevin. So I agree with where Bill wants to go and Te Taro.
Okay. So thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Te Taro. Sarah and Chris, how are we going to advance this in terms of your thinking to present back, well, bring this discussion to a head onto where to from here for council? Because, you know, 25 bucks a kilo, 25 bucks a tonne for carbon to 85, those are big drivers for us and for the future. How did we advance this going forward for regional council? Chris, Sarah, Chris first.
Kia ora, councillors. Look, I don't actually have an answer to that, but perhaps you'd allow us a little bit of time to have a think about this.
So that's my question. How do we advance this? So I'm just, yeah, please. Could be a discussion tomorrow, maybe. But yeah, I think we've got to get our heads around this, and we've got to fully understand the implications, as Chairman Leader says, not just for this year, next year, but for 50 years, plus 100 years. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Santiago. No doubt you'll be giving some sage advice to council in the future, but yeah, this is big for us, especially in the area of biodiversity and land use change.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add that between March the 14th and the end of April, there'll be a special engagement process with iwi.
Right.
James Shaw and NPR will be exacting it, understanding that there is some implications in that space.
Okay, cool. All right. Where are we up to? That's it. Thank you. So would somebody just like to move that the report from Santiago be received? Happy for that. Councillor Thurston, seconded by Norm. All those in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you for that. And thank you, Santiago. Thank you, Bill, for bringing it to our attention, and Chairman Leader. Right.
Will we get a copy of that report?
Yeah, we'll put it up on, now that it's been received, we'll put it up on Diligent, Shari. Okay. Yep. As all the presentations will be up on Diligent as well. Right. That concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your contributions.